mine. Oh, I gotta press the button, go live. Okay.
That helps.
Yeah. No, so like when you schedule a stream, you don't just have to click stream on OBS. You have to go to the YouTube page and then press start stream on there.
Good to know.
Because instead of just making a normal live stream, it has to send it to the scheduled one.
Okay. Yeah, it's going. It's good.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone in the chat. Can you hear us well?
I'm technically in the chat. Do you want me to respond?
Sure. All I see is bananas. So.
Yeah,
Okay,
I've been
that's
just plugging bananas
just says
into
howdy.
live chat.
Banana.
Bananas.
Yay. Oh, there's Rin Rin. Alright.
But they be.
Because I don't want to mess up anything since it seems to be going well, the stream at least. Daniel, could you post everything on like Twitter and the Discord to let people know, and then we can go ahead and get started. So,
Yeah.
wait, people say yes, and then other people say no. Can you guys hear us fine? Or not? Can hear you. Okay, what about everyone else talk? Make sure they can hear you all. That's good.
Do you want us to talk all at once as well, like a choir?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, turn your mic up just a little bit, Daniel.
Up. Okay.
Yeah.
Here, I'll just
Crank it.
crank it. How's that? Is that better?
That's good. And
Sweet.
can you turn yours up a wee bit, Choops?
Sure can. Give me a moment.
All right. Daniel, is your mic on? Says Matt.
Matt's always trolling.
Matt. Yeah, Matt always
Okay,
comes to my
everyone's
streams
saying
and
yes.
says, "I can't hear you because
Yeah.
you're." So this is normal.
All right, we can start then.
Sweet.
All right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Hylian Gamescast, episode 124. I actually went back and recounted to confirm that, so that's pretty great. Thank you all for coming and watching. There is about 50 of you that was waiting on us at 9:30, so apologies for starting a bit late, but we had some stuff that we had to do beforehand. And today we're going to be talking about a lot of the Zelda rumors, some Metroid rumors if we have time, get into E3 predictions, and we have a special guest here today, not the first time on the channel, but it is the first time on the podcast. Andy, who used to run McIntyre Productions and is now running the channel Night Owl, where he does non-Zelda related topics, but the quality of the videos are still really good. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Daniel, let everyone know who you are. So if they're listening and not looking, they can
Who
know
I am?
they can
I just
connect
hit
the voice
enter
to the
on a
name.
tweet too soon. That's who I am.
Cool.
Oopsie. I'm Daniel. You may have you might know me as Cap Bergerson, probably. And I'm always here on this channel pretty frequently, but I also do have my own channel where I post things like Zelda related and sometimes non-Zelda related content. So it's a good time. That's who I am.
All right, Choobs, go ahead and let everyone know who you are and where they can find more stuff from you if they're interested.
Yeah, for sure. I'm 𝐓𝐿𝐼. I haven't been on the podcast in a really long time, so you guys probably forgot who I am. That's okay. I occasionally stream on Twitch. We're playing Pokemon Snap tomorrow. I try to do once or twice a week at twitch.tv/𝐓𝐿𝐼 with an extra A because I can't spell. And once a week, Captain Bergerson and I do some sort of Saturday night stream on his channel at Cap Bergerson.
All right.
Oh, that's true. I didn't say that, but we do.
And Twitter at 𝐓𝐿𝐼.
All right, and our special guest, Andy, who is not on video, but you guys still have the opportunity to listen to his amazing voice. So, Andy, go ahead and let everyone know who you are and where they can find stuff from you.
Well, thank you. First off, before anything, I'm really glad to be on here. It's been a while since I've talked with Jesse over here, and we go like really way back. if anyone recognizes my voice, I used to do a bunch of Zelda videos back when I did McIntyre Productions, and it's been just kind of a wild ride just getting back into the whole Zelda community thing, which I've done for a while. But again, glad to be here.
Awesome. And your new channel, you mentioned, well, I mentioned earlier about your new channel doesn't really have anything to do with Zelda. So with this new type of content, what, when you first started your new channel, I know you said it's more of a hobby instead of the way that you took the original McIntyre channel, but what kind of stuff can they find on your new channel, and what inspired you to pursue that specific type of news videos or analytic videos, I guess I would call them?
Right. To bring us like a bit of context over here, when I was working on McIntyre, for a time, I felt a bit creatively restrained since I basically just did nonstop Zelda videos. And so Night Owl was just kind of a way to just work on other things. I focused with a lot of 2D animation on that end,
All right.
and
Sorry?
mainly just worked on a bunch of different topics ranging from other video games like Doom. I do a lot of things on Scorn, and uh, some things more geared towards philosophy, and that's Night Owl. I view sort of a bit of a passion project on that end.
All right. Is there a specific video that you're proud of that you would like people to go check out?
If you're into Doom, just any of my Doom videos. If you're into like something a bit more, I would say like thought-provoking or more philosophical, look at the Words video or any of the ones about cryptocurrency or economy or things of that sort. Making videos for Night Owl takes a while because I had to do like a lot of different animations for different ones, and not to say I don't like it, it's just a lot of work on that end.
All right. And even though you're not covering a lot of the Zelda news going on lately, have you been catching up on any of the recent Zelda news? Or
Oh yeah,
rumors going around?
definitely. Right now I'm just like a very casual sort of guy. I used to be really, really hardcore back in the day and like covering. Remember back when we used to call it Zelda Wii U
Oh, yeah.
before we even know it was titled Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
For a time, like right after I switched over from McIntyre to Night Owl, I was like, oh, I'm done with Zelda. I want nothing to do with it. But then I kind of just cozied right back into it. And like, I'm really, really excited for Breath of the Wild 2. Been brushing up with Age of Calamity lately. And really looking forward to Skyward Sword HD, though. To be honest, I'm probably not going to get a day one. But still looking forward to see any new changes nonetheless.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about Skyward Sword HD a bit later on, so I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that. With Breath of the Wild 2, since we haven't had you on the podcast, we've basically talked to almost every guest at length about Breath of the Wild 2, but since we have so many other topics, what is what was your reaction when they showed off the trailer, or whenever you got the chance to see it? I know a lot of your videos and stuff, and you always had a big focus on the Sheikah and the Shadow Temple and sort of the darker elements of Zelda, which is where Aonuma said this game was going, that it was going to be darker than Majora's Mask or something like that, or it was going to take themes from Majora's Mask. I forget the actual like word for word quote, but in general it was something like that, and I thought it might be perfect for you because it was taking Breath of the Wild, which almost everyone already loved, and adding in a bit darker elements that I know you used to enjoy with the other Zelda games. So what are your thoughts on all of that? And are there any rumors that have come up lately that have caught your eye?
Well, to add on that, the last bit you've spoken about, Monolith Soft has expanded their production team to kind of accommodate Breath of the Wild 2's development, which I found really, really interesting since I generally love a lot of Monolith Soft's work. Like I've been playing a lot of Xenoblade lately, so that's just kind of bit of my bias oozing in over there. As for the whole like lore side of it all, yes, I very much really like the whole dark atmosphere they're spinning off for Breath of the Wild 2. There's a lot of things dealing with the Zonai, from the architecture you saw within the trailer and the time shift stones, and I've seen a lot of good theories about comparing a lot of the architecture within the trailer to some of the stuff you would see in Breath of the Wild. And I know like Nintendo Black Crisis makes a lot of videos on that subject. Really good dude, by the way. I've spoken to him a couple of times. As for like any new stuff that I'm really looking forward to on that end, I'm really curious why Ganondorf, or like the remains of Ganondorf, is within a Zonai temple, since I assume he's Gerudo. What are the ties between ancient Gerudo to Zonai? What does that mean for the Kingdom of Hyrule in general?
So you're all in
And-
on the architecture and other elements being Nintendo going more or revealing more about the Zonai?
Oh yeah, definitely. I believe one of the developers said that one of the greatest mysteries in the lore is the Zonai. What happened to them? Where did they go? And we do see a couple of hints here and there in like basic Breath of the Wild, like the barbarian armor set is said to be hailed from the Zonai. There's a lot of theories about Lorelin Village being descended from them, along with other bits and pieces here and there from like the four labyrinths, for example. And it's definitely I'm curious to see how deep they're going to go in the lore with that.
Yeah.
And considering Monolith Soft is getting really involved with the whole development cycle, and they're really they like their lore. So I'm curious to see how deep they're going to go in it. And whatever the case, I'm probably going to like it.
Yeah, with Monolith Soft, I've been going back and forth on whether or not they are, because there's so many different remakes that are rumored, which we'll get into here in just a bit. But with all the different remakes, I've been trying to figure out, like, if Tantalus has Skyward Sword, Grezzo has Ocarina and Majora's Mask, and possibly working on a new one now from their the hiring thing that they put out a while back. So who would, like, out of all the Zelda teams, who would be left to work or port, like, just to work a few months to quickly port out this Wii U remake of, like, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess? And I thought it could be Tantalus, which it might, because they do have several different teams. Like, they're not all just working on Skyward Sword. And it would be easy for them to take Twilight Princess, since they already were the ones who remade it, and put it on the Switch. But, what was it? Yeah, so I'm not sure if I believe Monolith Soft is working on Breath of the Wild 2, as they did with Breath of the Wild, or if they were, like, if the Zelda team from Monolith Soft was made official, because it was a big public announcement they made, and they hired a bunch of people back then as well. If they made it official because they were starting on their own project, whether it be a new game, a remake, a 2D game, or ports, or whatever it is. I think some of them could still be working on Breath of the Wild 2, but I feel like the team was made into an official Zelda team so they could do their own projects. But if Breath of the Wild 2 development did kind of slow down, then I could see Nintendo being like, hey, we need your help again. So, because it's basically what they did when they were working on Xenoblade. So, yeah, that's personally my thoughts on that. But I do like the idea of the team being made and all of the new people coming in to actually work on Breath of the Wild 2, because the more people working on it, the more content they can get in the game within that time, which is kind of common sense. So, yeah, the more people working on it, the better. So either way, I would be happy if they are the ones to port it, if they weren't, or if they're helping with Breath of the Wild 2. Yeah. And with the, I would go ahead and get into the Zonai too, because I could talk about Breath of the Wild all day, but we have actual topics to get to. So yeah, everyone go check out Andy's channel, and really quick to get everyone else's opinion, so I'm not going on for hours annoying everyone. Daniel, what are your thoughts on Monosoft and Breath of the Wild 2?
Well, I know they've been expanding a lot, like hiring like crazy, and just growing as a company. And in my eyes, because I know I've been skeptical about this release date in the past, openly skeptical and openly even negative about it, but thinking about it, because we had a chat about this the other day, just you and I, Jesse. With the first game, they really started bringing tons of people in closer to the end of development, so it's kind of almost feels like a sign of good things to come. But they did a really good job with the first game, obviously, with what they contributed to the world building there. And like Andy said, they're big on their lore, which I haven't played any Xenoblade, but I know how story intensive those games are. So if that's any indication of that, I'd expect good things from Monolith. I think they're working on another project, as well as I think they assisted on Splatoon as well, if I'm not wrong, if I recall correctly. But which means they probably split into 3 teams, whatever they're working on, whether it be Xenoblade or something else, and Breath of the Wild 2 and Splatoon 3. That's if I'm remembering this correctly, though. But that's all I'm going to say for now.
All right. And Choops, what are your thoughts on Monosoft and Breath of the Wild 2?
I mean, I don't really have a super strong opinion on it. I also didn't play Xenoblade. But based on what I know of the games that they've worked on previously, they've done a pretty good job. And most people are pretty happy with what the result of that has been. So, yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about this game regardless. Nintendo always finds a way to pull through regardless of who they're kind of getting the help from. So we'll have our bad opinions and we'll have our good opinions. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
All right. I guess we can get into the first official topic here. So this month, I posted a video a couple of weeks ago, I think, talking about Skyward Sword HD and 𝐓𝐻𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐻 DLC getting new information, possibly at least 1 trailer, if not 2 trailers, with 𝐓𝐻𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐻. The DLC is just 2 bonus items, so it could just be the company like posting on Twitter or Instagram just screenshots of those items, since it is just 2 items. But I think they might, if they did have a trailer, then they could kind of have a tease of the first pack that's coming next month as well. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think that is happening. And I said that about 2 weeks ago, just based on common sense. And we talked about this a little bit before we started, so I could catch everyone up on the same thing. But basically, Skyward Sword HD, despite what seemed like almost everyone asking for Skyward Sword HD and getting upset when Aonuma said making traditional controls for it would be impossible, I think was his what the word he used, and then that the hint was just a tease or whatever when they were at the orchestra. It wasn't meant to mean anything. It was just them joking. They're not working on the game. And everyone called Daniel and all of us crazy for the videos that we posted saying that it could come and that it could have motion or traditional controls and it could have Amiibo support. And despite all of the negative comments telling us we were wrong, we kept saying it was coming, and it did. I didn't expect it to come that soon, though. But it was really great to see that all of the stuff that we speculated would be in it ended up sort of being in it. Even the traditional or optional controls, which was odd, especially after him saying it's impossible. But maybe he's like secretly just trying to build up how great his developers are. Like, yeah, it wasn't possible until we did it.
Right.
But yeah, so it got, despite everyone asking for Skyward Sword HD, when it was announced, because of its $60 price tag, and I guess because they didn't show off anything new, if it does have anything new, everyone's like, this is it? This is the same engine? It's not made to look a lot better, like the difference between Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD compared to their original games, where Wind Waker HD looks like they did a lot of work to it because they said they used parts of the Zelda Wii U or Breath of the Wild engine on Wind Waker to make it look like that with the added bloom and everything else. And then with Twilight Princess, because it wasn't Nintendo, I think Nintendo didn't want to loan out their new Breath of the Wild engine, especially since they hadn't even released a game on it yet. So Tantalus was just left with doing whatever they could with the old engine of Twilight Princess, but it still turned out great with the new textures and lighting and everything. So it was pretty good. And now with Skyward Sword HD, because it has so much negativity and everyone complaining about the $60 price tag, Nintendo's going to want to do a lot of marketing and publicity for the game. They need to convince all of these Zelda fans that were asking for Skyward Sword HD, that are now complaining, that yes, Skyward Sword HD is worth your $60. And if they do that, and it's like 10-15 minute video, and they show it during the Nintendo Direct, then everyone's just going to complain even more that, hey, Skyward Sword took up 15 minutes of the Nintendo Direct. You could have shown off 2 or 3 more new games in that time. Not realizing that even if that 15 minutes wasn't there, it would still be all other games that they showed. It's not like it was taking up space, it's just adding it to make it longer. Like an extended Direct. But everyone would complain about that taking up so much time because it's not a new game. Like if it was Breath of the Wild 2, everyone would be happy, but it's Skyward Sword. So everyone, that would just cause more negativity. So what can Nintendo do? They can show off maybe an Amiibo trailer at E3 and then have a new trailer this month or early next month. Doing something to convince the players that it is worth the $60 pre-order, because whether it's a new dungeon being added, like Twilight Princess HD had a new dungeon, they could show off the Amiibo support. They need to be more clear about the differences between the motion controls and the normal controller, because even after that first trailer, there was still a lot of people that was confused. Like, can you still swing if you're using traditional controls? Or what's going on? So they got to clear up a lot of stuff, and they can't spin that at E3. They could do it during like a treehouse after the Nintendo Direct, but I think they'll want to get ahead of it and do as much positive marketing for the game as they can to convince people. Because if all of those other remakes are coming, like I think the reason that, and Daniel and I talked about this before, the reason that if all of those other remake rumors are true, the reason we haven't heard from it yet, the reason we haven't had that big Zelda 35 blowout is because Wind Waker HD, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, any of those games would completely overshine Skyward Sword. And if they did reveal it, like if they revealed Twilight Princess this month, a lot of people would take away their $60 pre-order and put that towards Twilight Princess. So I think they're saving everything so they don't overshadow. But yes, new Zelda news. That's not a good sentence. But new Zelda stuff coming this month is almost a guarantee, even if it is just �KOei posting screenshots of Age of Calam's DLC and being like, hey, the new items are available.
I think it's a very real possibility that as far as the Age of Calamity, because it's just the pre-order bonus stuff, it's not even the full Wave 1 DLC pack. I think it's a very real possibility that they're going to just post a tweet on it, and that's it. Because, I mean, they announced the game via a tweet. Like, they just put the trailer on Twitter, and they were like, this game is going to exist, guys.
Yeah,
and it's still sold like wild. So I know that it's probably common sense between us here chatting, but I know someone's going to watch this video and be like, there's going to be Zelda news, and then get super mad if there's not like a 30-minute direct about a pre-order bonus for DLC for Hyrule Warriors. So just to clear the air, it's a very real chance it's just going to be a tweet, and that's it, guys.
Yeah.
So,
kind of how we've been getting a lot of our Nintendo news in, the last year and a bit, with there not being a direct for ever.
Yeah, that's true.
Even a lot of the stuff with Breath of the Wild, they showed off in tweets. Like there was the time lapse of the Temple of Time, getting a better
Right.
view of it. There was just like a bunch of little things, and then there was even a website that they had where they would post images and like developer journal talking about, hey, what was it? The Minish used to be in the game, or hey, instead of finding Koroks, you would hunt for the Skyward Sword spirit stones. They'd be spread out not spirit stones.
The pedestal.
Yeah, the pedestal
sword
of time
pedestal?
was
Yeah,
just like all over Hyrule, almost like they said it was supposed to be like a callback to A Link to the Past's Lost Woods, where there's just like random pedestals everywhere that are fake until you find the real one. So I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. Koroks is a much better idea, even though there's 900 of them. But yeah, and you mentioned that they showed off the trailer, like they just dropped it on Twitter one day. And I kind of feel bad for them because I think that was probably meant to be the big thing to show off at E3. Because when we interviewed all the different voice actors, they all mentioned they began around March and it ended around June. Some of them ended before that. But with it ending in June and most of the audio being done the months before June, I would think that would like that they had that schedule planned so that they could cut together what audio they had for an English trailer to show at E3. And then E3 was canceled. We didn't really get anything. So instead of making a big deal about it in a direct, it was just dropped a few months before its release. And it's still in pre-orders. I looked this up for the new video that was supposed to post today, but it's going to be posting yesterday because I didn't want the podcast and a big video to go up on the same day. But I looked it up, and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity sold more pre-orders than Hyrule Warriors, Hyrule Warriors Legends, and Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition's entire lifetime sales put together.
Wow.
Damn.
And
But I mean,
sold
makes
more
sense because-
pre-orders. Sold more pre-orders than the individual games. Twilight Princess HD on Wii U, Breath of the Wild on Wii U, Wind Waker HD on Wii U, Wind Waker the original on GameCube, Twilight Princess on GameCube, and Four Swords Adventures on GameCube. So all of the GameCube Zelda games, all of the Wii U Zelda games, all of their lifetime sales. Age of Clams, a spin-off that plays nothing like a normal Zelda game, had more pre-orders than all of those classic games. Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, maybe. Wind Waker.
Right.
It's sad.
But that's just because Breath of the Wild was like the entry point for so many people to like enter into the series.
Yeah.
It just brought in, waves of new fans. And then for that announcement, they're like, "Oh, it's like another Zelda game or whatever." There was actually a lot of people I talked to were confused about what it was when it was first announced.
People are still
because they didn't know
confused.
what Hyrule Warriors was or what a Warriors game was or anything like that, right? So, but it does make sense. I mean, the way they marketed it, they're like, "This is the Breath of the Wild prequel." So of course, anyone who played Breath of the Wild probably was hopping on that pre-order right away because
Yeah.
they didn't know any better. But
Andy, you've been a bit quiet on this subject. What are your thoughts on all of this? Skyward Sword HD, Age of Clams, DLC. What would you expect to see this month, if anything?
Well, adding on to the whole direct bit, I was curious on what your guys' thoughts on the future of directs and this whole Twitter bombing thing that Nintendo's been doing lately.
I think it's always good when a company can be like during E3 there would be those games where the developers would come out, show off a cool game, the crowd would get excited for it, people at home would get excited for it, and they're like, it's available today. Sort of like the same thing Nintendo did with the original Champions Ballad DLC for Breath of the Wild when they showed it off, and then they were like, it's available later tonight. So it's not quite like that because those were during big presentations. But I think you sort of get the same kind of response from fans, like that shock surprise that like, oh, this was unexpected. So whenever they do reveal like, here is this like huge game that tells a version of the backstory of Breath of the Wild that everyone loved, and we didn't hint towards it, we didn't leak it, we didn't do anything, just here's the trailer, that's it. And then obviously it worked out for them. So yeah, and it was only a few months before the game released, which was the even crazier thing, because you'd expect them to be at least 6 months ahead of the reveal. But Nintendo is a curious business. Tubes, what are your thoughts on that? Do you like that they're posting stuff? Do you think Nintendo Directs are going to go away and they're just going to be like, hey, here's the game on Twitter or Instagram or whatever?
Yeah, so that's really weird because for me, I think it makes sense that they're not doing as many Directs right now because we don't have as many heavy-hitting Nintendo games coming out, and Nintendo's aware of that. Like, they are aware of what their current seasons look like in retail, and as far as the pandemic has affected them, they're very aware of that. So I think a big part of not having those Directs is because they're not currently pushing out the same content that they were. It makes a lot more sense to be pushing a lot of these smaller games into tweets, which is really funny because somehow we're still getting some bigger news from like bigger games and tweets as well. And honestly, I think it's a really good way for Nintendo fans to kind of check their expectations. I personally love the power of a Direct. There's nothing that gets me more emotional than seeing, a new Animal Crossing game or a new Legend of Zelda game. Like, nothing gets me more emotional than that. So definitely, like, Directs have power, but I totally understand them not doing them as frequently, and I kind of support it. Like, no offense to Nintendo fans, or all offense, depends on how you want to take it. Like, y'all gotta chill.
That's a sentiment. Y'all gotta chill is the truth. I don't think Directs are going away as well, but I definitely see them as being almost like secondary as a form of delivering news going forward, right? But I don't think Nintendo doesn't care about them anymore. I think we're definitely going to get one E3 at the very least, for sure. And that they I think are aware that people thirst for Directs, and people are like constantly hounding them for when's the next Direct or whatever. There was like an entire Twitter account that was like, how many days since the last Nintendo Direct? Yeah. And like every day they would just post a tweet is just like counting up. And it's just I think people get a little too, I don't know, overzealous about it, I guess. I personally, like, I don't feel like this absence, this drought, like it's killing me to not have a Direct every month or whatever, because I think there were some days even back in the Wii U era where they were having frequent Directs and there wasn't that much to show, and they just weren't that like good. They weren't interesting. So if Nintendo's going to hold off till they've got some like really bombastic, awesome news, sure, great. I would rather them have them be a little more sparse, I guess, but really great Directs, rather than just doing it every now and then just cause and being like, okay, there's 4 3DS games that I don't care about, and there's no new Wii U games. And that's how it was. There's no new Wii U games again. That's really what we went through, guys. I feel like people who are like really choked about the lack of like releases or gaming news forget just how bad the game drought was during the Wii U days. So yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts. Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like, it's not like we're bored. Like, we aren't out of things to do. Every time I turn around, I'm like, okay, cool. I picked up Monster Hunter Rise. This game's great. I need to put at least 200 hours into it. And then, bam, Pokemon Snap comes out. Like, I don't have time to consume all of this media.
That's another thing too. I constantly have more games than I have time for, and then I end up just playing Zelda again, anyways. So it's one of those things. Yeah.
All right. To finish the topic off, Skyward Sword HD, maybe trailer coming this month. 𝐻𝐵𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐴M's DLC is releasing this month, so obviously we are going to get something from that, even if it is just screenshots or like a 5-second clip of Link or whoever using the weapon. At the most, a trailer showing it off with maybe a tease of more stuff that we'll end up seeing 100% at E3. So yeah, keeping it as short or as simple as possible. Just those answers. Skyward Sword HD, 𝐻𝐵𝐼𝐻𝐿AM's DLC. Which do you expect to actually see this month? Or do you expect to see both? Daniel, you go first.
I could see both coming this month.
All right.
I could see both. I really could see it going either way, to be honest, though. Like, I could very well see them just doing a tweet for the Age of Calamity stuff that's coming, and that's it. But I could also see them going full with the trailer and everything for both things, too. So it just... I don't feel like there's much room for in-between, though. I feel like it's just going to be either way.
All right. Tubes, what about you?
I have to agree. I mean, the time between E3 is so short, and it doesn't make sense for any of this to be included in it. And if it is, then what are you guys doing? You're gonna make everyone really upset. But yeah, definitely, Age of Calamity. We're definitely gonna see something, maybe in the form of a tweet. Skyward Sword, probably.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point that I didn't say, is that E3 is like literally next month, right? So it's yeah, I feel like there's a good chance they'll just save everything up for that. And but I mean, yeah, the Age of Calamity stuff's a surefire thing because it's releasing before E3, so they've got to show it off sooner than later. Yeah,
right.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Andy, what are your thoughts on this? And since I don't think you were able to finish your all of your thoughts on the original topic, go ahead and
asked us the questions.
let us know anything.
We got carried away.
Yeah, you can go ahead and
you guys are good.
let all of everyone know your
I
stuff.
definitely think there's a sense of a greater sort of urgency for Age of Calamity, since they've already sort of committed to a roadmap. Like, they have the expansion 1 and 2, and I believe somewhere written there is expanded roster, which I think they're probably going to add Suga or Aster, someone, into the mix. So, as I said before, I definitely think Nintendo's going to randomly tweet out saying, "Oh, here's so and so for the expansion." As for Skyward Sword, like, E3 is literally just a couple of weeks away. So I'm not sure if they're just going to save everything for that event or just kind of trinkle stuff along the way. But I could definitely see it happening if it does happen.
All right, awesome. We're going to try to get through some of the other rumors and stuff, the other topics, a little bit faster, so we don't go on too long for everyone. But our next one is one that Daniel and I talked about with Rick, and it was around the time when we first scheduled the podcast with Andy, which was, we sort of had something planned for last week, and it ended up not going on. So when Daniel and I decided we were going to come on today, and Tubes came on, and we talked to Andy and got him to come on. So that was great. But between, like right after the last podcast, I guess. Yeah, it was after the last podcast. I asked you earlier if it was, because the person said it was what we said during the podcast that made him reach out to us. So basically, I get a lot of emails from people that are essentially, hey, my uncle works for Nintendo. Here's this blah, blah, blah information. You know, it's like that schoolyard thing where everyone's like, oh, my dad's brother's cousin's sister's wife works at Nintendo, and he says Super Mario 4 is coming out on Super Nintendo or something. So yeah, it's just weird stuff like that. But every now and then I'll get something that is a bit convincing or weird, or just, if it is fake, then it's just insanely detailed to be fake. And those are the ones that I'll basically, all of the rumor or leak or any of those videos that I make, and a bunch of the theories as well, I basically have a long, crazy, drawn out, kind of like how I'm talking now, a bunch of random messages that I send to Daniel, like, hey, this happened, so this other thing happened, they're sort of connected, and then this third thing's going on. Does that mean this fourth thing is also happening? Because it all adds up to this. Like the one thing we were talking about last week, which is exactly why that person said that he messaged us, because he said something weird, like, despite people in the chat being negative, saying stuff about, oh, you're just making it up, you don't have real information or whatever, instead of us being like, hey, this is it, we're just making up something to say, even if it wasn't what we thought, just something random that would get them to stop being negative. Instead of doing that, we just kept on saying that we weren't going to say it. And he said that despite the negativity, the fact that we kept our credibility or whatever instead of making up something, or our reputation, I forgot the exact words, but because of that, it made him decide to email us, because he pays attention to rumor and leak videos basically for fun, just to see how wrong people get. But then he seen one of the videos that we had talking about the localization, which was from a different email that I got a few months ago from a different person. And this person said that when he seen that, because that's the area that he works in, it was interesting to him. And we were so close on so many things, but off by so little, that he was itching to correct it. And since it wasn't any serious information, it wasn't really about Breath of the Wild 2, more about the process of the job itself, which Daniel's seen the email, but there's a lot of it that I couldn't show in that video, because I thought maybe if, because of how specific he went in his job, then maybe that would be able to narrow it down. And so if it was fake, then congrats to the person who put a lot of work into the email. But if it is real, then it's really cool. And most people, whenever they send fake stuff, it's like, oh, Breath of the Wild 2's name's blah, blah, blah. Like that tweet I showed you, Daniel, where the person was literally like, hey, my cousin in Japan works in Japan.
Right.
And says,
that's the thing for me, too, is that the credibility goes out the window as soon as you give up your source. Because, like, if, for example, which is not true, but if, like, my uncle actually worked at Nintendo, and then I went on Twitter and I was like, my uncle works at Nintendo, and he told me this, and Zelda gave me this, well, that my uncle just got fired now. Because he signed an NDA and he spilled the beans, and, you know, like, that's so, like, instantly that credibility goes out the window when people give up their sources immediately. Yeah. So if anyone on the internet, just heads up when like, the leaks.
That's not even about just, like, making games as it is. Like, I also worked at Nintendo and was also an NDA, like, under NDA as well. So a lot of me being on the podcast was me not being able to talk about what my job at Nintendo was like.
Yeah.
And this sort of thing happens all the time, like, especially leading towards E3. Like, the weeks leading up to E3, there's so many quote-unquote leaks and, like, so much quote-unquote official information going on there. So you kind of have to take everything with a huge grain of salt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about the email, going back to it really quick, this is the last thing that I had to say about it, was that most emails, like I mentioned, was people being like, hey, this is the name of whatever, or this is the story or whatever, and it's just their fan fiction, and you can tell it's like some 14-year-old or really enthusiastic 30-year-old like me that has weird ideas for Breath of the Wild 2 and just wants to have their name mentioned in a video or something. So they send out emails. And with this, instead of saying anything revealing about Breath of the Wild 2, like, there's a few things in there, but most of it was just going really, really, really into detail on that. And I can't see someone sending an email that's wanting to like have their stuff talked about on their favorite YouTube channel or whatever, and instead of giving something that most people would actually find interesting, he went into the boring stuff that most people really don't care about. And the detail that he went into and correcting the past things. And he said something like, in the one video, the previous localization video, we said that, or I said that, hold on, I gotta think. We said the person told me that they worked basically at Nintendo Treehouse, because I guess they didn't want to get specific. And I talked to some other people that we know that has connections at Nintendo and stuff. And I have a couple of old, not necessarily friends, but acquaintances that's been on the channel that literally had that job writing for Nintendo, working on Zelda games, like back in Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time 3D. So sometimes I can message them and they'll give me some news about, not any new games because they're not working there, so they can't give anything about new games, but the whole process and stuff to clear up information. And they basically said that Nintendo Treehouse is just like a community or fan term that they use just to like, so they don't have to say like, I'm a blah 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 and give out their title. They can just be like, yeah, we're all here from Nintendo Treehouse, and it's a collection of testers and writers and blah blah blah. So it's just like a group thing. But he said he doesn't believe anyone would actually claim to work for Nintendo Treehouse unless they were trying to be vague or add in a bit of misinformation to try to make it harder to lead back to who they were. So, yeah, he said that and then there was some other stuff that he corrected, but basically it was really weird. So I posted the video about it. You all seemed to like it, and like Daniel said earlier, no one's going to send you an email and be like, hey, this person, like their uncle, their family member, their friend, no one's going to risk their job to get brownie points for a random YouTube channel.
Yeah, especially not on like a public thing like posting on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
Also something just on the topic of this email that you got sent, because I have the what you sent me about it. The thing that always, like when I read through this, the thing that stuck out to me as far as credibility for it goes was they focused a lot more on like, don't report on this because it's just not true, rather than actually giving like game details, quote unquote details or titles or anything like that. They were more focused on like, if someone tells you this, it's not true, don't worry about it because nobody knows that, or things like that, right?
Like the title for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, no one knows the game title. So if someone comes up to you, tells you the game title, they're lying, right? Things like that. So it's, for me, almost like they weren't giving tons of info or actual details, but there was a lot of information about processes, and a lot of info about like what's fake, like what's going around that's fake. And that almost seems like more credible information than any other real leak that's been going on right now, or at least most of the leaks that are there are some pretty credible information kind of leaking out lately, but most of it's kind of you know. So
and the other thing is, I did check with a couple of people after I posted the video, so I wasn't able to add this in the video, but the details that even if it is fake, like it could all be completely made up nonsense, but the stuff that he said about the processes and everything, the people that I asked and sent the screenshot to said that actually was how it went. So like it could be someone just getting lucky with what they're saying. But
yeah, it just, the spirit of it seemed less like someone trying to strike out and get their 15 minutes of fame or brownie points, and more like legitimate advisement on, hey, if someone says this, don't worry about it, or don't believe it. And this is actually how this process behind the scenes works.
Yeah.
Because most fake leaks are like really heavily
like the
focused
collection
on
thing.
details of the game, or like even if you guys remember before Breath of the Wild came out, there were tons of leaks about this is going to be a gameplay mechanic in the game. You're going to be able to have these options in the game and things like that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them were just flat out untrue or fake, right? So yeah, it was none of that in this particular email. So
yeah, and the thing that's like, why would a Nintendo, like someone working for Nintendo or someone writing for Nintendo, watch your YouTube channel? Like, what are the odds that people at Nintendo actually pay attention to your Nintendo video? But the thought that I have is, we've had people that worked at Nintendo, people that's voiced on games, people that's developed games, people that's written for games at Nintendo on the channel. So if one person comes on or two people come on that have a specific job, like being a writer, and they have friends that they work with, then it would make sense for their friends or friends of their friends to be interested and be like, oh, you were on this thing? Let me go check it out. It's just like casual work talk or whatever. So it does make sense that they would be paying attention. And somehow even the guy who's in charge of, or like the vice president of all of Nintendo's marketing, for some reason followed me on Twitter a while back. So people
Nice.
at Nintendo
Nintendo
do
ninjas.
seem to, yeah, and there's a bunch of other random people that has like whatever their job title is at Nintendo of America in their thing, and I'm like, is this Nintendo sending their ninjas after me?
They're scoping us out to make sure our leaks aren't too legitimate.
Yeah. And so the final thing that I want to say about this is no one did it on this video because we didn't really go much into the script, but one of the things they did correct about the script process was that in the last video we said, I keep saying we, but I said that, well, the person told, whatever, you guys get it, but anyways, it said that with the voice acting, the localization would finish the script, and when the script was completely localized or mostly localized, then they would start the voice acting process, and then if any corrections needed to be made later, there would still be a small amount of people that would stay on to continue, but most of the team would move on to the next game. And he corrected that and said that, at least for Breath of the Wild 2, but it seemed like he was talking about in general, that the priority of the script wouldn't be translating the full game and then just getting to the dialogue as you get to it. It would be dialogue first, or the important cutscenes first, so the voice actors can start the recording process and finish that as soon as possible. That way, if there are changes later on, then it won't take as long to have them and like get the voice actors back in the studio to redub or change certain lines or record new audio or whatever. So they would translate or localize the actual script and dialogue, if there is any voice acting in the game, first, so that the recording process could have more time to finish their work instead of having to rush. And then they would do like text boxes or map descriptions or in-game item details and stuff. And yeah, so that was the correction that he made on that. But on that last video, because we talked about all of the localization stuff and the script, because we mentioned the script, there was a lot of people that assumed, oh, it's the voice actors that you've had on a bunch of times. Because I think at that point we'd had like Joe on 3 times, we had Sean, who's Rivali the Great Deku Tree, on 3 times, and we had a couple Zelda or Patricia and Impa, I think. Maybe we had Impa after, I don't remember. But yeah, there was a lot of people that thought it was one of the voice actors, that we were best friends and they were just telling us all this information. And no, Like, a lot of them said that finding out they were working on the Zelda series was like a dream come true for them. And I don't think they would want to risk that. And they wouldn't just be risking their job at Nintendo working on the Zelda games and be replaced like that guy that did the voice in Mexico for Breath of the Wild on the podcast, and he leaked that something was in the works, and it was confused, like, was it Age of Calamity that he was referring to, or was it Breath of the Wild 2? It was probably Age of Calamity, but he ended up getting fired just for that little slip. So I don't think the other voice actors, like, even seeing that as an example, which you wouldn't really need to see an example anyways, you should just know better to begin with, to not say certain stuff. And before we go on, I'm usually the one that talks to him the most, but sometimes there is a group chat or something so we can all schedule out everything. But we always go through not necessarily a list, but a bunch of stuff that, like, hey, we can't talk about this, blah, 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 or we can't say this, we can't mention this. That's why when we had Sean, Joe, and Impa, I said Impa, and yeah, Andy, right? Yeah, I got confused because Andy's on here too. Yeah, Andy.
Joe, Andy Gibson.
Yeah, and Andy Gibson,
yeah.
The voice for old and young Impa in Breath of the Wild, and then Age of Calamity. But when we had them on, we didn't really mention Breath of the Wild 2, despite a bunch of comments being like, hey, tell us about Breath of the Wild 2. And I don't even think we really went in to Breath of the Wild. We just talked about Age of Calamity. And when we had Joe on, we didn't even talk about spoilers for Age of Calamity because it was so soon after the game released.
It had just come out too. But even still, like professional courtesy aside, like, even like that would be such an awkward spot to put them in too. Like, to bring them on to this interview and like ask them about, this game that they may or may not be working on, who knows, and like that we know that they won't be able to talk about. Like, that's just like that's how you burn bridges if you're in this line of work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's how you will never get an interview with anyone ever again.
Yeah, and that's also what I was going to mention, is that they wouldn't just be risking their job at Nintendo, like their dream job working on a Zelda game. It would also affect their entire career, because then other big publishers, like, they might get lucky with an indie game. They'd be like, oh, I would love to have the Great Deku Tree or Daruk or whoever to also voice in my game. Like, for someone small, they probably wouldn't care because that's just more publicity for them. But for bigger studios, they're like, oh, we don't know if we can trust this guy or girl or whoever. So we're going to go with this other person who doesn't have a history of leaking all their stuff. What was it? There was the jokes Daniel and I were talking about, where it was like Ubisoft or whoever on the train, where the guy was working on Tomb Raider and Assassin's Creed.
Oh, yeah.
And
they were working on it on the train, and someone just like literally on a cell phone snapped like a picture of their laptop, and
it was like a year before the game was even announced. But anyways, with all of that, the stuff that we talk about, even if something did slip up, which you guys can watch the old podcasts, nothing really slips up on any of it, and most of the interviews are after the game already releases, so there's not anything that they can slip up on, or it's really close to release anyways. There's been a few times that we did to promote the game. I don't know if it's the right word. But what was it? So you can go back and watch. Like, there's nothing that slips out or that they say that they're not supposed to be saying. And even if they did, those aren't the videos that I would post, because if we were talking, like hanging out at a bar or something, and they had a few drinks and they were like, oh, blah, 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 and they accidentally did slip something, we still wouldn't post about it or talk about it, because then that would risk our friendship with them. And then not only would it do that, but in the same way, it would risk their job and potential to get other jobs. It would risk our reputation, and other voice actors or developers or whoever would be like, well, I can't trust you, because if I accidentally say something in a message or an email or on video before, like something saying like, hey, I can't talk about this, so don't ask about this, when it's something no one knows that they're connected to, then if we mentioned that, then they wouldn't be able to trust us and other people wouldn't be able to trust us. So we wouldn't jeopardize all of that. A different situation, but somewhat like what we were talking about with the Breath of the Wild 2 stuff on the last podcast. Like the stuff that we put together, we can't talk about because we don't want to risk the friendship with the other people, not the voice actors. So yeah. And then even with the Skyward Sword stuff, there's someone saying that the voice actors were the one that told us that stuff, but they wouldn't even know anything about Breath of the Wild. Like I was talking to Sean. It was whenever. So here is. I hadn't posted online or anything that we got these yet, but these are signed Amiibo. There's another one somewhere. It might be in the floor, but they're signed Amiibo from Joe, and Sean did the same thing. We were going to give one to each of us. We're going to take one of the Amiibo, and then there was one so about 5 Rivali Amiibo from Sean, and he signed them. The 4 was for one for each of the hosts, and then one to give away for subscribers on the channel or whatever for the big giveaway. And I hadn't posted about it yet or mentioned it, but since we're on topic, stuff like this, getting all these signed Amiibo from the voice actors, wouldn't happen if we said any of the stuff that we weren't supposed to say or anything to jeopardize them. And so the morning that I was talking to Sean to schedule the whole him sending a giant box of signed Amiibo to us was the morning that the Rivali first 4 figures statue was revealed. And Sean said that he didn't even know they were making a statue. So even on stuff that involves characters that he did, he doesn't even know about. Like that was a complete surprise to him. And someone told us something was coming in April. I kept asking Daniel and Nintendo Prime and a bunch of other people if they'd heard stuff about Zelda in April. I don't know if this was what the person was referring to or not, but either way, we did get the collection of the champion statues coming from first 4 figures announced. But so, like I mentioned that, and then the same way that the voice actors didn't know that there was really cool statues being made of the characters they played. If they didn't know about that, why would they know about a completely different game made by a completely different studio that doesn't even really have voice acting aside from the usual grunts and stuff that's already in the game and doesn't need to be redubbed? So like, why, in what world would one of the voice actors be able to be like, hey, Skyward Sword HD is coming out? Like they would have no idea. Sometimes when you get the script for a game, you don't even get the full script. You just get what your character says and then context of what you're replying to or whatever. You don't see or get the script or the story for the other characters specifically to keep stuff from being spread out. That way, if they give specific things to specific people and something does leak, then they know how to trace it back to that person. So that was another thing about the whole Breath of the Wild 2 stuff. But yeah, I guess that's it. Andy, do you have any thoughts on all this? I know I said we were going to go through them really quick, and the next one is like going to be 2 seconds, so the rest are going to be really quick. But yeah, Andy, what are your thoughts on all of these Breath of the Wild 2, the email thing that we were talking about, and the whole localization thing and stuff? Because it was basically, we didn't even say it really, but to be clear, the whole point was that Breath of the Wild 2 was done with localization for the most part, and at least the translating and localizing the script, the game, and everything else, and most of them moved on to another game that they didn't mention, and a few of them stayed on, not this person, but a few of the other people stayed on to work on Breath of the Wild 2 stuff. So yeah, Andy, finally getting to you. Mr. Night Owl. Hi. Your thoughts. Sorry.
Right.
I ran.
Yeah, I very much agree with your sentiment, and it's also just a massive professional courtesy. And I've been a few years out of the game, and I was wondering, is the Nintendo brand ambassador still a thing?
Yes. It's a lot more
Okay.
restricted, though, because
Yeah.
someone streamed a game early for their friends, and Nintendo found out.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that. The whole situation you were talking about kind of reminded me of that. About the whole incident just kind of made the whole... I thought it, like, just went out the way end as a result of that. Apparently not. But, like, events like that in which someone leaks out information that they shouldn't have kind of ruins it for other people, like, especially on the development sort of end. And as it's said before in this podcast, it's a really, really quick way of burning bridges. And like I've seen it like on my end through since I was really early in with the whole process. Like me and Jesse really go way back during the days of we were talking about Zelda Wii U and before that as well. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I
Actually,
very much
before I
agree
started
with
the YouTube channel, Andy, really quick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but for context, for those who don't know, Andy, who used to run the McIntyre production channels, which was like, at the time, really the only channel that was dedicated to covering Zelda theories and rumors and stuff about Zelda Wii U as it was known at the time. And that inspired me to start doing my own Zelda stuff, because at the time I was just doing music on my channel. And Andy and I were both also inspired because there's a YouTube channel that did something similar, but for Skyward Sword, when it was just known as Zelda Wii. And I remember Andy mentioning that.
Were you talking about Earthbounding?
Yes, Earthbounding.
Yeah, that dude is a legend.
Yeah. I don't think many people know who it is, but it's a great channel that did what we were doing, but like 10 years ago when
Yeah, I think he
Skyward
was
Sword
the
wasn't
only
even
dude
announced.
that was doing that at that time.
Yeah, and but yeah, so that's what Andy's saying when he says that we go back. He was the one who literally encouraged me to start doing Zelda stuff. So you can kind of thank him and a couple of other people for all of this even starting. So yeah, thank you, Andy. But
I really
continue.
appreciate that. On that note, it's kind of wild to think since I remember when I was talking to Commonwealth Realm Conrad, like before he was making his channel, and I remember the day when he made 1,000 subscribers. And then like I was talking to him, I was like, "Oh wow, you're gonna do so well." And then right now he's like well over that, like over 100K or something.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really cool guy, by the way. I first talked to him when he sent me an email, and back then he had a Polish history channel, and I thought I was like, "Oh wow, this looks so cool." And then I struck a conversation with him, and then we just like collabed for a bit. Now he's doing his own thing, and I'm like, I'm really, really proud. First off, I think I did something similar with 𝐓𝐿𝐷, like way back in the day. This makes
Yeah.
me sound really, really old, but
No. Andy's also basically the reason that so without really getting into the Chamber of Sages group, Andy's the reason that HMK, Commonwealth Realm, 𝐓𝐿𝐷, Dr. Wily, maybe a couple of other people, and then there was even people that wasn't in the group that we collaborated with a lot, but Andy was like the centerpiece that allowed us all to be friends. And like when we went to E3 and they were all texting me being like, "Hey, come out to dinner, come hang out with us," or whatever, and then we went and had that big group dinner at the restaurant that we always go to for E3. So situations like that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Andy. So again, thank you, Andy, and giving more context to what he's saying. So yeah.
really, really appreciate it. Like it's kind of wild to think about how like time is kind of sped up since then. Since I remember talking to HMK about building the Chamber of Sages to begin with, and it's just kind of scary to see like how the years kind of went by. But I'm glad to see how like Commonwealth Realm, Dr. Wily, 𝐓𝐷𝐬𝐿, yourself, along with others. It's and I know things are going to like skyrocket in terms of content and so on when Breath of the Wild 2 gets more coverage. And I'm really, really excited to see where things will go from there.
Yeah, awesome. So, Choops, did you have anything final to say?
Yeah, don't be a dingus.
Yeah.
What?
Don't be a dingus. It goes
We're
with,
talking about not leaking other people's information.
Yeah.
I'm telling y'all, don't
Right,
be a
right.
dingus.
it
I'm
perfectly.
sorry, I got so swept away with Andy's bit there about, and I'm just.
No, it goes perfectly
I was
well.
pulling back into what we were talking about casually. But yeah,
Yeah.
I know all of these people. We all went out for dinner with them. Conrad pronounces me as Chublema.
That was so funny. We showed up
Poor
at
guy.
the restaurant, and he's like, "Which one of you is Chiblema?" And I'm just.
I'd been like messaging him back and forth on Twitter trying to arrange this entire nightmare dinner, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Conrad.
Yeah, it's really good.
Oh yeah, like I think when you first met, or Conrad, when you first met Jesse, kept calling him Jess for like the beginning parts or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I told
Yeah.
Daniel this. I was always intimidated by Conrad. I don't know if it's just like the way people from his country present themselves, but it's like all like super professional, where he's like not slouching or anything. He's like standing up perfectly straight, like he's about to. It's like he's laughing, he's smiling, he's having fun, but there's still like a serious thing to him. And to me, it's just like, oh, I gotta be proper too.
He shows up to a summer in California wearing a blazer. Are you kidding me? Dude, it's sweltering out there.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, he's too
Hot.
used to like the Norwegian snow.
Yeah. And we also met Joey Ferris, who I met through Andy, because he was working with
right.
Commonwealth Realm at the time. So,
Oh, that reminds. Oh, you just gave me this huge, like, sort of flashback. I haven't heard that name in a long. I remember I was invited to. There's this really, really cool content creator by the name of Luis Vila. I'm so sorry if I like forgot the name, but he ran this podcast. He still does stuff. I think it's like Luis VGN or something like that. And he ran this podcast, and he had Joey. And he had his own channel called Ferris Wheel Productions or something along those lines.
Mhm.
And then that's when I first met. This was like really like a long time ago. And then I was talking to Joey, and then around the same time I was also talking with Conrad, since we were like collabing on stuff at the time. And then that's when Joey and Conrad first met.
Oh wow.
And like when you first mentioned that, I kind of sort of forgot like the whole like chain of events of how they met. And they were working for a really long time on Commonwealth Realm. I think Joey moved on to Game Explain at this point.
Yeah, he's at Game Explain now.
we're actually there's been like 4 misscheduling incidents, but like last week we also and then a couple of months ago we had Andre from Game Explain, something planned with him that ended up not happening. So
Yeah, Andre and Sean Shipluk.
yeah.
Sweet.
So
It's funny, that reminds me of a funny story though. When we were at it was E3 2018 actually, so a few years back now, and then we actually met up with Joey and Conrad at we went and stopped by their Airbnb, and I think Joey, I don't know if Joey's a hilarious guy, by the way. I love him. I've had some really great conversations with him, but I think he had a few drinks in him by this point, and I just remember him telling me how he's like, there's some serious cultural differences staying with someone from Europe, because Conrad does not seem to care about nudity, and I've seen more of him, and he's like, I've seen more of Conrad than I ever wanted to. And I was like, oh wow, I just met you, dude.
Fair, they crammed like 7 dudes in one very small Airbnb.
Oh yeah,
That
absolutely.
place was ripe.
That's very true. And I felt bad because we had the four of us that year, us three, and then Rick, our MFH, and we had this huge house that we were renting out instead, that Airbnb. But of course, their apartment was like it was like a
Right
block
downtown
from
LA.
the convention center. So that was the trade off they went for. But I was like, I would not want to be this cramped in here. Like they've got like one bathroom and 6 dudes in this like 1-bedroom apartment, where Conrad's apparently showing all. So
Yeah.
not
And
the comfiest
actually,
situation.
Gibbs in the chat says, hi, friends. He was actually one of the people that was fans of the channel that we became friends with, and he stayed with us for a few days during that E3 that we're talking about now. So, yeah, I guess we can move on to the next one, and we can do it really quick. Oh, shout out to us. His sub, Jesse. He's a Patreon supporter. Hello. So the next one is... wait, everyone finished, right? Were you able to finish, Andy? Because yours kind of like went on to like different topics.
Yeah.
So I don't think you got a chance to. And Tubes, as you can tell, with her snappy "Don't be a dinkle," which perfectly sums up everything because
A dinkle?
dinkle. What was it you said? I don't know. Was it a dinkle? We were talking about dingles the other day.
Dinkles
We
work
were.
too.
Yeah. So Tubes is the one that always like smacks us with the whip and be like, get back on topic. So this next one, Metroid Prime 4, was actually, this is from the same person who sent a new email because he didn't reply to my other email about to go back with him on the Breath of the Wild stuff to ask more stuff because other people said like, oh, maybe you should ask him this or whatever. And then was it? So instead of replying to that, he sent a new email and basically saying that Metroid Prime 4 was either starting localization or was getting ready to start localization. And at first I was like, the full game? No one expects Metroid Prime 4 to be done for like another year or two at least. Like it'll be lucky to even be on the Nintendo Switch because everyone thinks it's just going to be in development for like the next 5 years. So him saying that it's in localization now, Daniel and I talked about this yesterday. It does add up to past game like Metroid Prime 1, 2, 3. They all took like anywhere from a year and a half to almost 3 years to make those games. And yes, they are smaller games than what we get now, but my thing is that the technology back then and the engines you used was also really slow. So the computers and the engines they have now make everything a lot faster. So it doesn't completely make up for having a larger game, but having more people on your team, more experience, faster computers, easier engines and tools kind of makes the time for development kind of equal out. Because if you look at Ocarina of Time, it took just as much time to develop as like almost Breath of the Wild did. And those games are completely different, but that goes to having more people, more experience, better tools, faster computers to make such a more detailed, larger game. But so we don't really know about the development of Metroid Prime 4. We know something happened, and then they moved over from their Japanese studio to Retro, who did the Prime games. This adds up with their time on the past games. We don't really talk about Metroid on the channel, but since this was from the same person, and Daniel's a big Metroid fan, I thought we would at least mention it, and I think Andy's also a fan of Metroid, so I thought this would be a quick, nice topic for him. So there's a chance the full game could be in localization, but if everyone is correct and the game's not coming out for a while, then there could be a chance that if this is true, that the game is about to start localization, it could just be what in the game industry they call a vertical slice of the game, which is just like the game's still in early beta, but they take one level and make it look as good as they can and fix it as much as possible. Even though if you go outside the designated area, the game's going to be completely broken. You're going to walk through walls or do dumb stuff where doors aren't going to open. But if you stay in the area that you're in with the NPCs that they programmed and you go on this very specific path, that they go on when you see them playing their gameplay demo on stage, and they like do very specific things. That's basically it. And then the game doesn't come out for like another year or two. So that could be it, especially with E3 coming up. The game could be, like, instead of the full game being localized, it could just be a small team working on whatever they plan to show off for either a quick trailer or a gameplay demo that they do. Like if they do a Nintendo Treehouse thing, then this could be localization just for that. And yeah, so I wanted to get your all's thoughts. We can start this time with Andy. Are you a Metroid Prime 4 fan? What are your thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's kind of depressing, like on a side note, because the Metroid like franchise hasn't been as profitable as other Nintendo IPs. And then I saw this random tweet saying that Hollow Knight has actually outsold every single Metroid game out there. And
Oh, that hurts. I love Hollow Knight, but that hurts me like
Yeah.
deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what I always bring up about Link's crossbow training selling almost twice as many copies as Wind Waker.
Also hurtful.
Yeah.
Damn. But I am hopeful that we'll see something Metroid Prime 4 related on E3. I'm not entirely sure if we will or not. I am like, since it's been 2 years since the development update came out. Like it was out in 2019. I forgot which month exactly.
January.
Oh, okay,
I had
that's
to
good.
check. I checked before this podcast. So. Mhm.
So they have more or less 2 years of development. With that being said, like usually they take around 3 years for a Prime game, generally speaking. So assuming they're really, really deep in development, I am hopeful we'll see something at E3. Then again, it just, first off, 2019 doesn't really feel like that long ago, at least on my end.
Yeah.
And especially
We're
with
all in
COVID.
Groundhog Day, so
Yeah. And especially with the whole global pandemic and people are working at home, I'm not sure how much that has affected the development cycle. Has that extended it? Is there any hiccups as a result? So I'm hopeful we'll see something, but if we don't see something at all, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised.
all right. Tubes. Are you a Metroid Prime fan?
Sure haven't played a single Metroid game in my life. No siree.
So you're saying you're a master at Metroid?
Yeah, I'm a bad person.
For shame.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe I'll get around
Metroid
to
is a really
doing
good
it.
character. When you play the game, you'll like playing as him.
I will kill you.
Yeah, definitely a game that I've been meaning to get around to because, you know, our resident Bergerson here is a large fan, and I feel like I need to get on that train. I mean, for the sake of Metroid fans, I hope you guys hear something, because that is rough. But am not personally super interested, but it sounds like I have a lot of time to maybe get interested, so I'll make that my homework.
Yeah, people talk about lack of Zelda news, but like us Metroid fans really maybe that's why I'm like not in a rush for Zelda. We've endured so much.
Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, wait, are you done, Choops?
Yeah. That's
Okay. To quickly mention something Andy was talking about, where it's been so long, and whenever they showed it, they only showed off the title screen. It reminds me of with Square Enix. I think it was during one of their directs, whenever they first announced Final Fantasy VII being remade, and they like at the end of it, they're like they had the director's name on it and like the script writer and stuff or whatever, and the director of the game had just came off of Final Fantasy 15, I think, and he said that he found out Final Fantasy VII was being made when he seen on screen that he was the developer or the director of the game.
Oh, surprise!
Yeah. So it's
Also,
like,
Jesse, we got a super chat.
Oh, okay, go ahead, read it.
Sorry to cut you off. Taker612 donated $2. Says we're all crack addicts waiting for our next Zelda fix. Just Anyway, so yes,
Oh my
that's pretty accurate.
All right,
I need my fix.
Daniel, you're the, as Choops put it, the resident Metroid fan. Every time I see a Metroid tweet, especially from Pierre, from the guy that basically owns IGN, he posts a lot of random Metroid stuff, and I'll always tag Daniel in it because I know he loves that stuff.
It's called cyberbullying, by the way, what Jesse's describing right now.
Because you wish you had statues.
Metroid, though, I mean, like you said, that the first 3 Prime games didn't have that long of a development cycle each, and especially because going into the first Metroid Prime game, I'm like, the odds were really stacked against these guys. This was like their first game, and they came out with what is well regarded as like a masterpiece game, absolute masterclass. And they were developing a sequel for one of the most praised games of all time, or prequel, I guess. Prime's a prequel to Super Metroid, technically, and they were doing it, transitioning it from 2D to 3D, changing the to first person perspective, and doing all these things, but still trying to stay true to the original formula. Like they absolutely had their hands full, and they somehow pulled that off in like a very short amount of time, and came out with a really good product. But beyond that, I know that it's not all the same developers at the same time that are working on this game. I'm pretty sure, like, even though it's still Retro Studios, there's been turnover, of course. Companies have that. And they also hired tons of new people for this project, including pulling like from other studios, like designers from like God of War and Halo and all these other franchises. They're like cherry picking people and bringing them on board for
those
Prime
are
4.
really good franchises of, instead of like focusing on open world, like those are all really story driven games where like you go, the game puts you on a path and you don't really.
Well, don't say story driven in the Metroid discussion. Then you'll offend some people.
But yeah. Like it's not go anywhere, do anything. It's like you can kind of venture outside your area, but you're still basically on this path that the game puts you on. And of course, the whole Metroid gameplay mechanic of going back and exploring areas that you've been to is really cool. So I didn't know that they brought people from other developers, but the fact that they did, and that those developers were from games that are sort of in a style that would benefit Metroid Prime, because all those games did really well. So that's really, really cool. I didn't know that. Thank you, Daniel.
It's neat to see all those little people that I've been following it very close because I'm hyped for this game. Even though they've given us literally not even a logo, just like the number 4.
Fantastic Four.
But yeah, have you seen those tweets actually? Where they have like the Metroid Prime 4 and then the Fantastic Four logos, like who?
Oh yeah,
that's why I mentioned it.
I'm like, that's a good point. That's because they're both very, very similar aesthetic with like the blue lights and everything. But yeah, it's been really interesting to follow like how they brought all these people on board, and every time someone gets brought on board, the internet reacts in a way that the internet is prone to, and they're like, oh my gosh, are they just starting, or what have they been doing all this time? If they're just bringing on someone to work as an art designer, have they made no art for this game at all? And they're like, I'm like, that's not how game development works, guys. They don't have just one art designer per game. Like they're bringing in many minds to work on this, right? So no, that doesn't mean. In fact, usually, which actually we kind of talked about a little bit with the Monosoft thing, usually the more people they bring on, the further into it they are. Usually they start with most games, I'm generalizing, most games start with a very small pool of developers and pull more people in as they go.
Breath of the Wild,
there
were interviews where they were talking about it, I guess whenever they were just finishing up Skyward Sword and planning on what they were going to do next. They said it was only like 3 or 4 people that was coming up with the concepts and overall layout of Breath of the Wild.
Right. By the end of that game, by the end of development, Breath of the Wild had over 100 developers working on it, though.
Hundreds.
Hundreds, yeah. Like
didn't they bring in
more than any other Zelda game?
They had like their own 100 or hundreds of people working on Breath of the Wild, and then I think they brought in like 160. I feel like that's a number I've seen somewhere. people
know
just
this
from
anymore.
Monolith Soft. Like they brought in
Yeah.
that many people just from Monolith Soft. That doesn't include people they already had working on the game.
But I also like it's the thing is there's so many conflicting things because at the same time as all of that, so that all indicates like okay, the game's probably pretty far along. At the same time, the scope of this game I genuinely think is going to be bigger than any of the Prime games because that's kind of how they've done it. Like the first Metroid Prime game was pretty, Metroid, you got your different regions, whatever. And then Prime 2, they had this sort of double, you have all your different regions, but they had the dual world system. So it was like literally double that. And then Prime 3, suddenly you've got your different areas, but you're also going to like different planets and stuff. And it was wild. It's a great game. All three of them. Super good. So I just feel like the scope of this will be huge compared to those games because we've now gone from like 2 GameCube games and a like mid life cycle Wii game to a Switch title, which is gonna like far outperform any of these games on a technical aspect, right? The only thing is like I'm not sure what they're gonna do for the controls are what I'm like have some sort of reservations about because part of me wants to lean more into the Prime 3 control scheme, part of me wants to lean more into the classic dual stick original Metroid Prime controls and I think a lot of people just prefer the Prime Trilogy version where it's all motion, but you don't have your sensor bar anymore. So but that's also a Skyward Sword concern people have. I'm getting off topic.
No, really quick to what you said. There's a really
Yes.
thing that talking to Amanda that we know about Metroid and some other people and a stealthy boy that we know. We were trying to draw connections or like find the original the legitimate believable sources for Metroid Prime Trilogy rumors that because there's every year there's those rumors coming to E3 and if anyone is developing that I think it would be one of those unannounced Nintendo remakes that Tantalus has confirmed that they're working on. Because the only thing that we know they're working on that was an unannounced Nintendo game is Skyward Sword. And they said they were working on several Nintendo games. So what could they be working on other than Skyward Sword? Metroid seems to be a good fit because it has the motion control option and the controller thing, just like Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess that they worked on. So that could be a possibility, like get an update gameplay trailer for Metroid Prime 4 with the announcement of the trilogy thing. But that was just us like looking at rumors and speculating. So,
I mean, I think Prime Trilogy on Wii did pretty good.
yeah,
Not to
it's
say that
sold
they
out
couldn't release it
everywhere.
on Switch, but the more time goes on, the less I think Prime Trilogy is going to come to Switch. That's my pessimism coming through there again. But yeah, I don't think they're going to bring it out. I don't think it's going to release this year, to be honest. I would love to be wrong though, because I want to play the game. But I don't think it's going to come out this year. Even if it's in localization, they could finish it and then just hold on to it. And I think that's just because of the whole Zelda 35 thing. I feel like they're going to spend the latter half of the year, especially really focusing on that. And I mean, that's not to say no other games can come out other than Zelda, but Metroid's already, like Andy said, one of those not as profitable franchises. It's sort of stuck with my other favorite franchise, Pikmin, in this sort of realm of it has a really die-hard fan base, but it's a really small die-hard fan base. And so I could see them trying to sort of push it past where everybody's going to be Zelda hype, kind of push it till after that's died down so that it doesn't have to compete with all these big Zelda games or these big releases to come out. Because again, Pikmin, as an example, kind of came out, Pikmin 3 Deluxe came out during kind of like a lull in releases, sort of between all these larger titles. So I could see them kind of doing the same. I could be totally wrong, though. I'm just talking out my arse. So I'm done now.
No, you're
I
good.
promise.
I think that covers everything. Andy, do you have any final things to say before we
Sort of off topic, but a friend of mine's like a really, really massive Metroid fan. And so just to mess with him, I just sent, hey, Metroid Prime 4 news, and I gave him the link to the news story that Samus is going to be in Fortnite.
Oh, right.
That's what Hylian Luke was saying in the chat as well.
That is a pretty reliable leak though, because it came out from those like court documents between Epic Games and Apple apparently. Yeah,
good stuff.
Which is like, that's a whole nother huge can of worms. I don't.
Yeah, imagine if like that happened to Nintendo right after they announced like another expansion pass with like 5 characters. All the hype of everyone being like, this character's coming out. No, this character's coming out. F you, you're stupid. What do you know? All of that would just be taken away from the internet. Like they would have to find something else to argue about.
For Metroid is going to be the next Smash fighter.
No. I'm saying
if
it happened.
No, I know. I'm just messing with
Who's
you.
Samus? I only know Metroid.
Metroid will be the next fighter in Smash.
Yeah, he's a good boy. So Andy, do you have anything else?
One thing that kind of just comes to mind, a lot of earlier Metroid games, a lot of the themes that they brought up, they're really, really derivative of the Alien movies. Like for example, Super Metroid with aliens, Metroid Fusion with what was that movie called? Alien Resurrection. A lot of them have like similar themes, and they go really, really similar subject matter as well. If they're doing like Metroid Prime 4 and assuming they do something similar to that, I'm wondering if they're bringing anything from like, let's say, Alien or like Prometheus or Alien Covenant. I'm not sure about that because those movies can get really divisive about how the fan base really deals with them. But Metroid, in terms of its art style and direction, is very much derivative of H.R. Giger's work, and the sort of layout that he likes to explore when it comes to alien worlds and stuff like that. So I'm curious to see how they're going to deal with that with Prime 4.
Yeah, that's another thing. Metroid is a pretty dark franchise, just in general. Like, you're like, oh, what's this? Another friendly Nintendo game? And then you start Super Metroid up and you walk in his room and you're like, there's dead bodies everywhere. What am I playing? This is a Nintendo game? So, yeah, it's curious. I just wanted to mention, because people are freaking out in the chat about the Fortnite thing. Please don't be a gatekeeping dingus. Don't be a dingus, like Kayla said. No, but don't be a gatekeeper. Because the worst case scenario, if Samus ends up in Fortnite as a crossover character, is that more people will just be exposed to a game that you like. And there's nothing ever wrong with that. Especially because if there's more people exposed to it, more people buy the game, then they will make more games. Nobody's going to make a game that nobody's going to buy. So there's nothing wrong with bringing new fans into things, introducing new people to it. And I've seen a lot of discourse over the internet of people. Exactly, yeah, like Smash Bros. If we never, that's how Fire Emblem even came to the West, right? It was because Marth and Roy were in Melee, so don't be a gatekeeping dingus. If Sam, like my reaction when I saw that whole thing was like, oh, well, everyone talks about Samus versus Master Chief, who would win. I never thought Fortnite would be where that battle would happen.
Let Samus get that battle royale, that victory royale. Yeah.
Tubes, do you want to take the super chat?
Heck yeah, super chat. All right, Kino Bro donates £2. I won't die in peace without a Hero Shade game.
Wait, would that be a game where you're already dead then?
I assume, because I've seen so many comments about that, like way back in the day, since the Hero Shade is the hero of time, and he's had 2 games with Ocarina Majora, and there's this theoretical time gap between Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. What happened to the Hero Shade? How he died? What led up to those events? And people calling it like the Hero of Time trilogy, and there's a missing game in it.
Right.
I'm curious to see. Like, I don't know if Nintendo's ever going to do that. Probably not, honestly.
I don't think so. I think too much time has passed. Like real lifetime, but.
I think the only way we would get a third game, which we almost did, there was a interview that Daniel and I think we talked about it on the podcast before, where they talk about how after Wind Waker got so much hate and they went from Wind Waker 2 to Twilight Princess, in the middle of that process, before it became Twilight Princess, it was sort of like a new third Hero of Time, Ocarina of Time, third game or whatever.
But that was in 2006, right? When Twilight Princess came
Yeah.
out. So it was before that then, right?
Yeah.
But you just reminded me, Jesse, is there was this thing I tweeted about it on Twitter where there was like concept art from Twilight Princess that was found, and in one of the concept arts, it had Twilight Princess Link playing an ocarina.
Oh, that's really cool.
I don't know, you just reminded me of that. I tweeted that out like earlier today, and
if I
that's
post
weird.
the edited version of this video, then I'll find the screenshot and put it in there for everyone that wants to go and check it out. Or you can go follow Daniel and Tubes and Andy all on Twitter to see it. Well, not all of them, but just Daniel. But you'll want to follow the rest of them too, because they're cool too. Yeah, I guess that's it. A quick Metroid fun fact to end this off. The reason, Rare was kind of, sort of, almost completely put together for Nintendo to have a team to work on a new Metroid game, because the reason we didn't get one after Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo and the Nintendo 64 was Daniel and I, we've went over a bunch of the interviews a bunch of times. Basically, Miyamoto's always saying like, oh, I don't want to, or the other lead developers that had priority to be in charge of their own games and stuff, none of them wanted to work on a Metroid N64 game, because they thought no matter how much time, money, or anything that they put into the game, it wouldn't hold up to Super Metroid. So everyone's like, I don't want to try. Like, I don't even want to try to do that. And that's why instead of Nintendo doing it, they went and got another team and paid them to do it. Because a small team that just started being like, we get to work on Metroid? Heck yes, we'll do that. Because if they flub and fail and mess up, people are going to be upset, but it's not going to ruin their reputation because they don't have one. And then they could just like rename the studio or something. But yeah, that's a fun fact. That's why that's what led to Metroid Prime in the first place. But someone posted something.
I just put that art in our little chat here, just
Okay.
in case you wanted to find it later.
I had to check on my phone to see if it was anything.
Sorry, Jesse.
Because I can't take it off the full screen for Discord. Anyways, so this next one, what is it? The Ocarina of Time thing. We may end up skipping the E3 predictions because we've been going on.
I
But
always do E3 predictions next time.
yeah.
Yeah, and we did it last time.
So this is the last topic, and we will end with the Zelda mailbag. We'll each answer one question, either from the mailbag, who is questions from the Discord, and Patreon questions are put in the mailbag. But if any of you have a really good question in the chat, you can post it. And if it's an insanely good question, then we'll take it from the live chat. So save all of your questions that you all have been asking for the Zelda mailbag, is when we always answer the live chat questions, which is why I used to have it on, and then I took it off and I put it back on, because people kept on tagging or getting upset or spamming questions that they wanted answered. So I have it on the screen if you want something immediately answered. You're just dying to have it answered or to give your input and be on the show. That's how you do it. But we will answer all the other questions at the end. For now, it's our last topic, which is something I talked to Daniel and Rick about. Technically, it was just me putting up a big wall of text and them being like, okay. But basically, Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD has rumors coming out that 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 is working on... well, no, I don't even think they said 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿. The rumors are just that the games are coming, right?
Yeah, I don't remember 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 being mentioned in the And let me just double check that
Yeah.
said wall of text.
But they're
I feel like
they're
those
the
conversations
obvious
always, you know that
choice.
meme? It's like, I don't know, iCarly or something, and she's like, interesting at the computer. That's like me all the time. Like,
Yeah.
Jesse's like going on, and I'm just like, interesting.
Yeah.
So,
The
I'm just gonna.
So my wall of text to Daniel wasn't for a video idea like I usually do. Send a wall of text that's like, this person needs to be in an insane asylum. And Daniel tells me if I'm just crazy and it doesn't make sense, or if it does make sense and it is sort of believable. Then if Daniel gives his okay, it usually winds up in a video. But all the stuff you don't see is because Daniel's like, Jesse, dude. Like,
No.
do you need to talk to someone?
Oh.
No, so with this Ocarina of Time HD, Majora's Mask HD, the I think it was the person who after the Nintendo Direct said Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD was coming out, which was like a couple of months ago. That same person recently, like a couple of days ago, I guess, said Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD was also coming, and this blew up, and everyone was talking about it, and talking about it's been revealed or whatever by this person that Ocarina of Time HD, Majora's Mask HD is coming out, blah blah blah, and everyone's talking about it, and then this other person had mentioned Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD around the same time, and then I was thinking, like, like, this is something that we put in a video and went in depth on for, like, not just saying, hey, Ocarina of Time HD, Majora's Mask HD is in development, like giving reasons to back up the claim. And, like, 𝐓𝐿, for those who don't know, is always working on at least one Zelda game, sometimes two. Like, since they began, they have never stopped working on a Zelda game. They've always had at least one or two. Sometimes, like, I think at one time, like, there's a random period where they had, like, 4 different Zelda games in development at the same time. But it's like one was finishing up while another one was just beginning or whatever.
Super chat.
Oh, Daniel, do you want to take it? I can't see it.
Daniel,
You're mute.
I have brought shame to this podcast. No, it's Gibbs. Gibbs super chatted. Nah. May the 4th be with you, nerds.
May
That's
the
what he
Triforth
says.
be with you.
The Triforth. Oh.
Yeah, Triforth kind of hurts, but all right.
Fine.
You were trying a little too hard with that one.
Okay.
Anyways, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So with 𝐓𝐿, it's basically so they always are literally. It seems like they were made for Nintendo to be like, we need the studio to work on these other Zelda games, and that's what they've been doing. They've never not been working on Zelda, and for the 25th anniversary, they released 2 or 3 different Zelda games. The anniversary remaster of Capcom's 4 Swords and Ocarina of Time HD. And then the next year, I think they released another game, or maybe I'm confusing it. But anyways, they did that at the 25th anniversary. The 30th anniversary, they had another 2 or 3 games that was released like within that 1 or 2 year period of the 30th anniversary. And then they, like, as soon as they released those 2 or 3 Zelda games, you would think they'd take a break from Zelda. But they didn't. They just started working on another Zelda game as soon as they finished those other 2 or 3 Zelda games they released. And then, because I think that was around the time Majora's Mask came out. But anyways, so they released 2 or 3 Zelda games for the 30th and immediately started working on a 4th Zelda game, which is what I think is sort of happening now. So I think with Ocarina of Time HD, Majora's Mask HD, they already made the games for the 3DS. So it would be the obvious thing Nintendo would give the game to them to make in HD. because not only did they make the Zelda games, but they're also known for quickly porting their older 3DS games to HD consoles like the Wii U or the Switch, or even a couple of games went to the PlayStation 4 or computer. So not only do they have a history of making the Zelda games and have experience with it, but they also have a history of really quickly porting those 3DS games that they make to HD consoles, which is literally what they just did with the Miitopia game that was just announced. And a lot of people say like, oh, they were working on Miitopia, they couldn't have been working on Zelda. And it's like, that's a very small game that was already made that took a very, very small team, maybe a month, to port to the Switch. Like that was a game that could have been done really, really quickly because it's already done and it just needs to be ported. And it's already a really small game to begin with. So I'm not saying Ocarina of Time HD, Majora's Mask HD would take a month, but there is a situation to where if they are lazy, like everyone claims, they could just like literally copy it over and like just have it to where it runs natively on the Switch, and then you just get basically the same thing you get when you emulate it, like same textures, everything, it's just in HD. But they're not going to do that. They're going to update the textures, they're going to do all the other stuff that the game needs, and maybe even add in Amiibo support, because there was interviews, not for Ocarina, but for Majora's Mask, that they wanted to give it Amiibo support with all the other changes they made to it. That Daniel has a series on his channel where he goes in depth on the different changes for the dungeons and stuff that he doesn't like. And
all the stuff I hated that they did to
yeah.
3D.
So among those changes, they wanted to add in Amiibo support, but had no idea how they could do it. And they had this really cool Skull Kid Amiibo planned, which everyone would have loved. But instead of getting a Skull Kid Amiibo, because they couldn't figure out a way that it would work in the game, that would make sense, they ended up just turning that design into the little statue that came with the collector's edition, if you all remember the Skull Kid thing. Tubes or Daniel, do you guys want to? One of you guys want to take that?
There's another super chat.
Okay. Liam Stanley super chats $5 and asks, "Host, would you rather have a collectible for these new Grezzo remasters, Ocarina of Time HD or Twilight Princess HD? I'm looking forward to a big game overhaul."
Wait, what?
Is this two questions, I guess? Like, would you rather?
It's one question, but it's, I think the way that it's structured is a little bit weird. They're basically asking if we would rather have a collectible for Ocarina of Time HD or for Twilight Princess HD.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so
I'm going to say Ocarina of Time, because Twilight Princess HD already came out on Wii U not that long ago.
All of the other Zelda games got collectibles
It had the
except
Wolf Link
Ocarina.
Amiibo with it, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there was any other little knick-knack or collectible for Ocarina of Time 3D.
No, but
so I just feel like that's the game that needs it more.
all the other Zelda games did get some sort of collectible. As you mentioned, the Wolf Link for Twilight Princess, Wind Waker. Again, they also wanted to add in Amiibo support, like they ended up doing for Twilight Princess. But I guess at the time they couldn't come up with ideas, and then they finally did for Twilight Princess. But that's why you
Didn't
get the
Wind Waker come out before Wave 1 of Amiibo, though? Wind Waker HD?
It seems like it did, but there was interviews where they said that they wanted to give it.
Oh, okay.
And they also
maybe they
wanted
just
to
had
give,
Amiibos like already planned out, like
yeah,
in advance. So,
or it could have been like an update to add it in later. But I don't know about the statue that came with Wind Waker being what would have been an Amiibo. That would have been cool to have that Toon Ganondorf Amiibo. So I don't know if that's what they would have ended up doing, but that is what they did with the Majora's Mask. Getting the little statue instead of the Amiibo. So it kind of, like, Ocarina of Time is really the only one that does not have any sort of collectible. I don't know what kind of collectible it would come with. Could you guys think of anything?
For which one?
For Ocarina of Time? Well, that's part of the question.
It could be the
Anyway.
Ocarina.
What collectible would we want
Yeah,
for
that's a good point.
Ocarina or Twilight Princess? An Ocarina collectible? That would be cool. What about you, Tubes? Do you have an answer to his question?
I was tempted to say Twilight Princess, but after listening to you guys go on about it, you're right. Ocarina of Time doesn't have one, and therefore deserves one.
Ooh, a
So,
Saria
yeah.
amiibo
Yeah,
would be cool.
absolutely. Ocarina of Time. Twilight Princess could...
Wait. what kind of collectible though? Like what knickknack do you want with it?
I don't know. I don't collect amiibos, so...
Me neither. Totally don't.
Yeah, not a single amiibo.
Not a single one.
You got like 100 behind you.
That's beside the point.
You can't think of one though, Chubes?
No.
Give us a sleeping talon.
I really hope they don't.
Talon.
I hope they don't just like paint a controller gold and just call it a day there though. Like I don't know. Zelda's had too much of an association with the like just gold accessories that I'm just like quite tired of it. There was like a gold DS for Phantom Hourglass, the gold Wii Emote for Skyward Sword, the gold 3DS for Majora's Mask, and etc. 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 And I'm just like, I don't know. It just feels like almost lazy, which is why I like the Skyward Sword Joy-Con so much, because it was not like I half expected them just paint some gold Joy-Cons and call it a day, and they totally didn't. They actually had some really neat, unique designs, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. If they did like a Ocarina of Time one, I would just please not just gold Joy-Cons, please. Anything but that. Amiibo would be cooler though. Like even if they bring back, there was for the Zelda 30th anniversary a line of Amiibo that launched, which I actually have all of them behind me. But they had a bunch of different figures from different games. So they had 8-bit Link, Ocarina of Time Link, Majora's Mask Link, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, Skyward Sword, like basically almost every incarnation, almost.
Poor Minish
And
Cap.
so even if they just brought back that Ocarina of Time one from the 30th anniversary lineup, because that's a really detailed, it's a gorgeous amiibo. It's really detailed, really beautiful. I'd be down for that even. So yeah, we had another super chat as well. Actually, while we were still answering this question from Colton Cook, I'm just going to read it. Colton Cook donated $5. I don't know how copyrights work, but could a copyright renewal mean some kind of movie or TV series? I'm still mad about that IGN April Fool's Day trailer. Right, because on that note, there was a copyright renewal for Ocarina of Time, right, Jesse? Or it was a new copyright. It was not a renewal, wasn't it?
It wasn't a renewal. It was a new copyright. We had a video going and really in depth on it. You guys can check out. But to sum it up, is basically a bunch of copyrights. Some were submissions, but most of them, like there's Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, like a bunch of Zelda games, ended up getting like brand new copyrights, not resubmissions or whatever, so they can keep ownership or whatever. The copyright is like brand new submissions for a new product, which could be a movie. But it'd be for the game, because there was a situation with a couple of years ago. They did this same thing for Twilight Princess and Spirit Tracks, which confused me because I thought they would have went with Phantom Hourglass first. But anyways, there's trademarks or copyrights found for new submissions for Twilight Princess, which is the weird one, and Spirit Tracks for mobile platforms, which makes, or not mobile platforms, but like specifically like cell phone mobile platforms, not Switch mobile platforms, which is really, really weird, because that was something Nintendo said that they wouldn't do. They would make new games, not just bring all their older games to the mobile phones. But they also told us they would never make games for mobile phones. So who knows what Nintendo says? Who knows when you can trust them? So it was weird seeing that. Like Spirit Tracks, Phantom Hourglass makes sense. But Twilight Princess on your smartphone using virtual buttons, I don't know if that would work. But nothing ever came of that, unless it was like just an early idea they had. But these new submissions, Mario 35 had a lot of submissions exactly like this for a bunch of their games, and there some people suspected a 35 anniversary for Mario, but a lot of people were like, oh no, they just do that all the time, there's nothing coming from Mario, stop spreading rumors and lies and blah blah blah. And all those people ended up with their foot in their mouth when Nintendo announced 50,000 different Mario games during their thing. And I think it's the same thing with Zelda. But for whatever reason, I think most of the Zelda stuff was just pieced apart and given off early with not necessarily a big blowout thing with collection. Like, there's so many people still thinking there's going to be a big Zelda collection. No. Nintendo knows they can sell each individual Zelda game at full price. So why would they bundle it? That doesn't really make sense. But, what was it? So we actually get into that in a second when I get back to the 𝐓𝐻𝐻 thing. But that's basically it. I answered the copyright thing. I was going to go on another tangent, but I'm not.
And as far as like a movie or TV series goes, you all know my take is a big no thanks. But that's just me.
They did confirm. Well, they didn't, but some other guy who was working on a different Nintendo show that also got canceled. There was a Nintendo show confirmed to be in production that had, I guess, artwork designs and stuff made out as well. So it was in pre-production, and the other guy was working on Star Fox, wasn't it? A Star Fox show?
I think, yeah, this sounds right.
Yeah, and it was going to be for Netflix, but because all those leaks came out where every website was reporting on, oh, there's going to be a Zelda movie, Miyamoto was like, well, this ruins the surprise. If it's leaking out, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And then it canceled because everyone was talking about the rumor. So he canceled it, even though it had already started production and they had already spent money to pay tons of people to start making it. They still canceled it just because websites were talking about it being a possibility.
Classic Nintendo.
Yeah.
Also, don't interrupt. Callie Lynn donates $20.
Oh my gosh! Thank you, Callie.
So
do you have a question for the mailbag? Getting back to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. So basically, what I wanted to say is that all the websites well, not all of them, but there's a few websites. It's like, we now have information and details on Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD being made for the Switch. And when you go to the sources, it's just them saying, hey, this game's coming out. And it's from a few days ago when, I don't know if it was the same person that told me to check out 𝐓𝐻𝐻 that's also telling the other people, or if they have different sources or whatever. But that's how I found out, because there was an email that was just literally, hey, check out 𝐓𝐻𝐻. And I'm like, what, was something announced? And I went and looked, and there was nothing announced. And so I was like, oh, they haven't released a game since Link's Awakening. And it's been 2 years. And then I seen like, oh, they released a Zelda game like every other year. They're probably going to release another Zelda game. Hey, the 35th anniversary is coming up. Oh, they have a history of remastering 3DS games in HD and releasing them for HD consoles. I bet Ocarina of Time is going to be remade for the Switch. That would make sense. And then I went back and looked at it more, and I explained it in the video, and I talked to Daniel enough to drive him crazy over the whole thing before I made the video, because it was one of the things where I was like, is this crazy? Does all this add up? And yeah, so I personally think, and this is just me, and it's what I said in the video like 2 months ago, 𝐓𝐻𝐻, because those games are already made, they wouldn't need to remake them or like spend a lot of time on them because they're already done. They just need to be remastered or ported over, which they already do, and they've already done to a bunch of games, and it only takes them like no time at all to do that. But I think they would spend a little bit more time on Ocarina of Time because it will end up selling so well. So it would be worth the commitment to make it as best as possible and not just rush it over like they did with Galaxy and Sunshine and Mario. Not that that was 𝐓𝐻𝐻, but similar situation. So I think they already made Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask HD, and it's just being held on, which Nintendo in the past in interviews have confirmed that they do. If it, like, there's been games that are completely done, but they're just waiting for the right time to release it. One of the more interesting stories is with the Link to the Past, because it was Zelda 3 and it was multiplayer, and it was going to release on Super Nintendo or whatever, but they were waiting for another game to release. And while they were waiting, they were like, oh, let's go in and like add some new stuff. And then it ended up becoming a completely different game that wasn't even multiplayer. That was just Link, a Link to the Past. So it's crazy, because like they said the game was already done. They were just waiting to ship it. Because that was back when like cartridges could only be bought or shipped at certain times or something weird like that. But anyway, so Nintendo does have a history of doing that. So I think that's what they're doing with Ocarina and Majora's Mask. But a lot of people said, oh, 𝐓𝐿𝐴's working on a new Zelda game, because they were hiring someone for the Unity engine, which is what they wanted to hire people for when they started on Link's Awakening, but they ended up going with their other choice, which was Unreal Engine. And Link's Awakening had a lot of technical issues in Unreal Engine, and there's been interviews and developers from other companies saying that Nintendo has told them, I can't think of the right word, but Nintendo basically told them, hey, if you're going to use any third-party engine, we prefer if you use Unity because it works, it runs better on the Switch. And because Link's Awakening had so many issues, there was all the rumors that like, hey, Nintendo could be using 𝐓𝐿𝐴 to work on the Oracle games with the Link's Awakening engine. And that's what a bunch of websites and other people on YouTube channels were talking about. But if you look at it, Link's Awakening had a lot of issues using Unreal Engine. And they're not hiring for Unreal Engine, which means they're not going to be using the Link's Awakening engine. They could still use similar art style, but it won't be that same engine. Whatever it is will be in Unity. And it could be Oracle remakes using the Unity engine, which I think is a possibility, or Minish Cap or some other random game. But and that's crazy to say, like, hey, they just finished 2 HD Zelda games and now they're working on 2 more HD Zelda games. But they've literally done it before, and the times that they did that was for the 30th anniversary and the 20th anniversary. And it makes sense that something similar would also happen for the 35th anniversary. And so I was kind of heartbroken and distraught, and my world was going crazy because everyone was like, oh, there's new rumors about Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask coming from these people. And all they said was that they were told the games were coming out. And I'm like, but like this is something that I said like 2 months ago and actually gave like credible information to back it up on why it would be happening and explaining it, not just saying like, hey, someone told me this game is coming out. So yeah. And then there was some other things that I talked to Daniel about, because there was some stuff that I had mentioned to him that I think there was one thing that I didn't make into a video, but there was other things that I did make into videos. And then it's like a couple of days after I make it into a video, other known leakers just happen to come out with the same information. And I'm like, it could be a coincidence, but it's kind of odd that it only gets mentioned by those people when, like, after I mention it. And it could be the same person that's telling me that ends up telling them later. Or it could be a different person giving them information. But it was just odd that, like, you post something in a video and then, like, a couple of days later, other people end up saying it. And then they end up getting credit for it. And you're like, no, but this, you can look at this video. That's more than just a tweet saying it's happening. It's giving actual information and facts to back it up. And it came out before this other person just said, hey, this is happening. So that kind of bummed me out, because I'm like, yeah. And I talked to Daniel about it, but Daniel thinks it's just coincidence, I think. So
Maybe. But also sometimes newsy stuff is weird like that. Like, especially like the larger sites like I don't know if I should name drop any of them. But, there's some of those larger websites that do pretty, I would say, low quality reporting with their sources as well.
The Inverse article that posted a story about one of the Breath of the Wild 2 videos that we made, but ended up getting all of the details in the video completely wrong. Like, it was literally saying the exact opposite of what the video actually says, and they were claiming the video says it, and I'm like, do you even watch it? Like, that is not what I said at all. But there's like this article out there that now people can go and look at, and if they don't watch the video and they just read the article, they're like, oh, this guy is stupid. Why would he even say that? I'm not going to watch 𝐵𝐴𝐴𝐺𝐵. And I'm like, journalism should be taken seriously, which is why when we post a rumor or a leak, we're not posting all of the hundreds of stuff that were being sent. We're only posting stuff that people we know can say, yes, that makes sense, where they've heard of stuff. There's a stealthy boy that Daniel and I are friends with that has a lot of inside sources, and a lot of times I'll just message him and be like, hey, do you know anything about this? And he'll either say yes or no. So that's another way that I back up stuff. And there's a bunch of other people as well. Or like if someone who told us something that ended up being correct tells us something again, then so that's how it goes. And I want to mention it again. Daniel won't let me take credit for it. I don't think 𝐓𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐵 has ever said anything, but before the Nintendo Direct, when I had the video saying, hey, there's a Direct tomorrow, and then I posted the tweet that was like, wouldn't it be cool if tomorrow's Direct had a Skyward Sword HD announcement, Age of Calamity DLC, Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, and then there was a follow-up tweet that said something about Zelda hardware. And then all the Zelda stuff that ended up being announced was Skyward Sword HD. We didn't get a trailer for Age of Calamity DLC, but we ended up getting what the DLC was. Right. And instead of a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, there was a promise for Breath of the Wild news to come later. And the Zelda hardware ended up being the Skyward Sword. And the Zelda...
you said a trailer.
Yeah. The Zelda hardware ended up being... I thought it was going to be the Breath of the Wild 2 Switch dock or something, like they made for a bunch of the other games, but it ended up being the Skyward Sword Joy-Cons. So like the Zelda hardware, everything else ended up being correct except the Breath of the Wild 2 thing, and then maybe you can be iffy on the Age of Calamity DLC because it wasn't a trailer, but we still know everything that's coming. Do you think that counts, 𝐓𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐵? No, you don't think it counts. Okay.
Am I weighing in on something important right now?
No, it's not. It's not important. It's just a fun fight that I call out Daniel for sometimes.
I think that you and Daniel must be like connected somehow to like Nintendo, because you somehow will talk about things on the podcast and then it ends up happening.
Yeah,
like,
it's
we had
really
that
weird,
entire
isn't
segment
it?
talking about like wild games that could be made battle royale.
That
and
was
sure
a
enough,
complete
we got,
accident.
Like Tetris 99? What?
Yeah, and the Mario thing, because we were like, wouldn't it be weird?
Mario 35.
Yeah, it was literally the same thing. We were like, wouldn't it be weird if like Mario had?
Because we had that whole podcast up. We're like, what other games could they make battle royale?
Yeah, there's definitely something going on.
Now Pac-Man too.
I don't entirely remember the situation in regards to you posting.
Oh, okay.
I've just kind of been AWOL lately, but...
All right, Andy, do you think it counts?
I see.
Just put him in the middle of us. No, you don't have to answer, but I just like, if it would have been the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, then you could go with like the 4 out of 4 Zelda things, because I didn't say anything that wasn't announced, and everything I said was announced, just a little off. But I was also told that was going to be for a Zelda 35th Direct, not a Nintendo Direct. And I was also told Zelda was going to get a bunch of Amiibo stuff, and the direct ended up being Mario, not Amiibo stuff, Animal Crossing stuff. And the trailer ended up having Mario Animal Crossing stuff instead of Zelda. So I was like, well, that's weird. But yeah. But I didn't believe that because it was just a crazy thing. So I didn't make a video on it because I didn't believe it. But it ended up being true. So I should have believed it. But, well, not true, but Mario. Anyways, Andy, yeah, sorry. Hi. Hello, how are you?
Doing decent enough.
Yeah. So, do you want to weigh in on all of the Ocarina of Time stuff?
Well, a bit of a side tangent. I've played Ocarina of Time Majora's Mask like an unhealthy amount of times at this point.
That's a
Like
mood.
that. Yeah. Like that, and of course the remix with the 3DS. If they are going to make new versions, I assume they're either going to do some enhanced port from the 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 remix or something like that. I'm not sure if they're going to like do a brand new remix off the board. I kind of hope they do. The main reason why is because I feel as though the 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 remix are too saturated in terms of colors.
Yeah.
To point a really good example of this, if you compare the final boss fight with Ganon and Ocarina of Time, it's like really, really dark. You only see his eyes, and whenever lightning strikes, you see glimpses of him, and I really like that atmosphere. If you compare that to the remix for the Ocarina of Time 3D, you just see everything. The whole mood is just a bit lessened. So if they are going to do like remix, whether it be they're starting fresh or it's just going to be an enhanced port of the 𝐓𝐻𝐻𝐿 remix, I just hope to kind of tinker with that a bit. But that's just my piece on it.
No, I 100% agree, and that's a big issue I have with the. It's actually the video with the script I was writing today. I talked about that a lot, but the visual identity. This is why I think Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD are better remakes than Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D. The visual identity of those games is not lost in translation in those remakes, right? They've mostly just benefited from upscaling and upgrades, whereas the 3DS versions of those N64 games, they had such a much larger overhaul, but like the visual sort of identity of that game is lost in that, and like there's this sort of darkness that envelops you so much in those original games that is just kind of either gone or replaced with like weird haze, or even like Great Bay Temple is a good example because I worked on a video for that recently, where in the 3DS version there's like points where it's like literally just like too bright. You're like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm staring right into a lamp, and it's like there's no reason for it to be so overly bright and oversaturated. It's like someone like who they just like cranked all their settings to the max. And I think the reason they did that is so that if you were playing on the 3DS outside, that you'd be able to see what you're doing. But like, it just looks ugly to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's a certain atmosphere that's totally just in it. Like there's something scary and mysterious about getting kind of lost in these dark areas, and it's just like, there's everything's too bright and clean looking.
Also on that, for all of the gameplay and stuff, and even for Daniel, like if you watch a video with Daniel actually in it, I have a thing where I always turn him green. But like the background and everything looks normal, but Daniel's just turning green. And I do a bit of color grading on any gameplay that I use as well, and I always turn up the contrast 2 notches, and then I turn the saturation up 2 notches, and then I turn the sharpness up like between where it is at default and max, so it's like halfway through there to make it sharper and have more contrast and better colors and stuff, because it's something I started doing with Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild has a lot of that foggy haze stuff, and if you turn up the contrast and the saturation, like someone did a Vivid mod or something on computer that messes with the colors like that, but and it makes it look really good. So that's what I did on the gameplay, and it takes away that gray fog effect to where the colors start popping out. And then I just started doing it for the other games, but I never thought about it like this, but Andy was right. You were right, Daniel, because
Oh.
when I turn up the saturation on the 3DS games, which I'm even using HD versions from the Citra emulator whenever I use the gameplay, and I never really like it. If you turn up the contrast, it doesn't look good. Like, it looks better where it's at. And now I'm probably going to mess around with turning down the saturation to see how the colors could get closer to the originals and then compare that. So I'll be looking into doing
and
that.
just like, again, like Majora's Mask 3D, for example, like there's a lot of weird fog in that game too that wasn't in the original.
In what game?
In particular, in Majora's Mask 3D, like there's red fog everywhere for some reason, and like stuff like there's like this sort of weird haze
Which areas?
over the world.
Like the swamp?
Particularly kicks in. The swamp has like this weird purpley sort of haze constantly. The night of the final day, particularly, everywhere has this sort of red haze, and it just, I don't know, like there's just like they were trying to go somewhere new with it, and change is not bad, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like if they sort of gutted the original feel of the game in a way, just to make it like more accessible, quote unquote. There's like the game, like honestly, the visual changes are the least offensive to Majora's Mask 3D. The gameplay changes make my guts like wrench and everything.
The Deku hopping on water, the Zora swimming, the eyeball fights.
The eyeballs, the Giant's Mask.
But Daniel, you get two fishing ponds.
The ice arrows get so
two.
nerfed. Like the thing is, like, fishing's not something I missed that much.
Two fishing
in a
ponds.
game like in a game like Ocarina of Time, where it's very accessible and you can totally take your time with it, a fishing hole totally makes sense. But Majora's Mask is all about like just urgency all the time, and the fishing hole just like feels so like out of place. I guess, I don't know, because it's just like too calm and it's weird. But
I think
I'm rambling too much.
No, I was about to ramble, but I won't say what I was going to say.
Okay.
So on the back to the original topic, I guess. No, wait, you went off a tangent on what Andy said. So Andy, finish what you were saying before. Yeah.
I was just talking about the Ocarina and Majora's Mask potentially if they were to be re-released. Mainly just to do with, as it was said in this podcast before, about just maintaining the visual integrity. And I suppose there's difficulty in that because obviously these are N64 games and they leave a lot to the imagination since they're not really that graphically intensive. So a friend of mine mentioned giving them the Final Fantasy VII Remake treatment, and that's quite a commitment. I'm not sure if that's probably the best way to go, but it's something that kind of stuck with me since I love Ocarina of Time. Like, it's probably, like, I played Breath of the Wild a lot, but Ocarina of Time, like, I'm really biased towards that game since I've played that since I was a kid. It's just, yeah, I just hope if they manage to look at it again, just to give more care to it, I guess. So
yeah, that is an interesting. So they could have spent this time remaking Ocarina of Time HD from the ground up with the new engine and everything made specifically for the Switch, instead of porting this engine from the 3DS that's very, very limited. And even in HD with new textures and lighting and everything, it's still going to look like a GameCube era Nintendo 64 game put in HD on the Switch. Like, it'll be about the same as what they did with the Mario collection that everyone complained about. Like, you didn't upgrade these, remake them, they're just ports. And if that same thing happens with the 3D remakes, where it's like it's the same game, just in HD, and they only worked a few months on it, like I'm thinking they did, then it's gonna suck. But instead of spending 2 years working on some other games and then taking a few months out of that to port over Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD, instead of taking a few months to do that to both of those games, if they did spend all this time working on a single game, and it was Ocarina of Time HD, that would be amazing. But it's very, like, it's the thing where, like, you would have to flip a coin to, like, it's a 50-50 chance. Is it just a port, or is it another remake from the ground up? And a lot of people say Nintendo already remastered the game for the 3DS. They're not going to do it again. But it's like Nintendo always does this, and like re-release and port older games and stuff. Like Pokemon Red and Blue has had like 4 or 5 different versions, even all the way up to Pikachu and Eevee.
Well, Pokemon Company is a different story, like in every respect from Nintendo. But
Pokemon Company and Nintendo are not friends.
They have a financially motivated symbiotic relationship.
They both make billions of dollars from each other, so they're like, okay, I'll put up with you for another year.
I would say like Pokemon Company makes really smart business decisions, but really weird video game development decisions, and Nintendo's the opposite. Nintendo makes fantastic video games and really weird business.
The friend speaking of weird, this is really quick. The friend we have that writes for Did You Know Gaming? That you applied for. Have you heard back from them?
Not yet, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mentioned you to him, so
it's okay.
They are aware.
He's not the
of
high
you.
rank,
So talking to the Did You Know Gaming guy, he mentioned, because we were joking about Pokemon Snap, and he mentioned Pokemon Teeth or whatever, and it reminded me. You talking about weird business decisions? There is a Pokemon game they made to help kids brush their teeth.
Oh yeah, yes, Smile, I think it's called.
Yeah, so it's like they are doing everything they can with those games. But yeah, finish what you're saying, Daniel. Or it was Andy's turn, right?
Oh, what's going on?
Daniel went off another. Daniel went on a.
Too much. That's...
No, Daniel did a spin-off of what Andy said. We went back to Andy, and I think Daniel did another spin-off.
Did.
So
I'm sorry.
Andy, do you want to finish up what you were saying?
I think I already did finish.
Okay. Well, in that case, I basically said all the stuff that I was going to say anyways. With if they did remake it, then Ocarina of Time HD remade. That 2 years they've spent since Link's Awakening, they could have been putting it on Ocarina of Time HD. And we'll go to 𝐓𝐿𝐼𝐻 next, but I told Daniel this, and I said it in a video, for the reasons that I think they didn't remake the Oracle games and then start on another game using the Unity engine, that it would have made sense to remake Ocarina and Majora, because if they did Oracle games, they would have to start from the ground up, because Link's Awakening's engine had issues. And if they made another game that had those same issues, then fans would be like, why did you do this? This was so lazy. We told you there were problems with this, and you ended up using it again. And they're hiring for the other engine they wanted to go with, Unity, instead of Unreal Engine. So they're smart enough that we can see, hey, they realized this game had technical issues with the engine. They're not using it anymore. They're building another one from the ground up using Unity for a Zelda game. So I don't think the same company that's smart enough to see that and go with the other engine, even though it meant getting rid of all the assets you already have built for the other engine, and you're starting over, taking more time, more money. A company that's smart enough to do that, I don't see them spending 2 years remaking both of the Oracle games in that same engine. Like, I think they've shown that they realized there was problems with the engine. So I think they're too smart to do that. I don't think they're that dumb to have remade the Oracle games. But I think the Oracle games could be remade right now, because even if it was just Ocarina of Time, and even if it was just a port of the 3DS version, like worst case scenario, a 3DS port that has very little changes and like just updated textures and stuff, no real actual changes, that Ocarina of Time HD, just because of that name, Ocarina of Time HD, would sell more pre-orders at the full price of $60. Kind of like what we talked about with Age of Calamity selling more pre-orders than the other Zelda games. But it would sell more pre-orders at $60 than Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons bundled together at only $40. Ocarina of Time HD would have more pre-orders at $60 than both of those games collected at $40 throughout their entire lifespan. Like, if Age of Calamity got over 3 million pre-orders, I think Ocarina of Time would easily get 5 or 6 million. And I think the Oracle games, even as a collection, at a discounted price of $40, would, and I'm talking American currency, sorry, Daniel Chubes, you gotta like do the math in your head. Did you guys freeze? I think they froze. Let's see. Alright, give me a second. I'll still be talking, but you guys will not be able to see. But you can still hear me. Okay, are you guys back?
Oh, he's back.
There
Okay.
he is.
So how much did you hear? As soon as I went to fix this, it was there. Okay, so anyways, like I said with Age of Calamity selling 3 million pre-orders, or over 3 million pre-orders, and that is a spin-off that had different gameplay that people didn't really expect or know about because no one paid attention to the originals. But if that got 3 million, then Ocarina of Time HD would easily get like 5 million pre-orders, which the original Ocarina of Time on Nintendo 64, when it first released, actually held the record for the most pre-ordered game of all time, even though not that many people really had a Nintendo 64 compared to other consoles, because that was when Nintendo was starting to go down. But so I think Ocarina of Time getting like 5 million pre-orders at a full price of $60 and only having a small team port it that worked on it for like 2 or 3 months. You didn't spend that much time on it, you didn't spend that much money on it. It's going to make like 10 times more just off of pre-orders than taking an entire year or two to remake these 2 games from the ground up, the Oracle series, and then bundling them together and selling it at $40. Its entire lifetime sales, I don't think, would reach 4 or 5 million, even if it's bundled and discounted. I don't think it's going to reach that much. But Ocarina of Time HD, just based off the name, would be easily 5 million. Because more people have Switches now than last year when Age of Calamity released. And this is a game that everyone has thought about or wanted, and not a spin-off. And the title alone, Ocarina of Time HD, even people that don't really know what Zelda is still kind of know what Ocarina of Time is, just because of the reputation that it has. So the smart business decision, like if you were Nintendo and 𝐓𝐲𝐲, would you spend 2 years making these 2 games that you know isn't going to sell that well? Or would you spend 3 or 4 months on this quick port that you can do with a smaller team that's going to sell like 10 times more? Like, the smart business decision there is to do that, and then use the money you make from selling all those games to fund your next remakes that are starting from the ground over, like the Unity games. So that's my thoughts on all of this. But Chubes, and I'm sorry I was using American currency. I said this earlier, but it was when you all cut out. So sorry for anyone that has to like do calculations in their head. So, Tubes, what are your thoughts on this?
American?
Huh?
Were you saying $60 US?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's still basically a full price game, and that retails at $79.99 Canadian.
All right.
So, still means that it comes to $89 after taxes, which still sucks, but...
Yeah, that does suck. But, yeah, so Ocarina of Time HD, what are your thoughts on all this? Do you think it is coming out? Do you think the rumors are true? Or do you think it's something we're going to be waiting on? And if you do think it's coming out, when do you think it's coming out?
I don't know when I think it's coming out. I mean, they still haven't done anything for the 35th anniversary for Legend of Zelda. But again, like, they don't really want to overshadow anything happening with Skyward Sword. So if they do, probably not till next year, I'm thinking. And it's probably just going to be another kind of lazy port coming over to the Nintendo Switch. I can't imagine them doing anything spectacular with it. But we will buy it anyways, because that's what we do.
All right, Daniel?
Yeah, I still think any Zelda, like Zelda 35, anything like that. I'm sticking to my guns. I've been saying it for months now, but I'm still thinking late summer or like September, around that range, if they were to announce anything, just to give Skyward Sword time to sell, of course.
Oh, so that would be an announcement, not a release.
Yeah, because even if they announced it, but they're like, oh, but it's not coming until the such and such date, like, I still feel like that would be enough for people to jump ship.
Yeah. Move from Skyward Sword pre-orders to this. Oh, there's a super chat.
A super chat from Liam. Daniel? Yeah, Liam Stanley. Would you personally prefer to have a quick to download OOT that doesn't take up much space, or Breath of the Wild style OOT that gets the Pokesnap Redux treatment?
Ooh. The latter.
Well, when you say Breath of the Wild style OOT, you kind of lose me there, because those are really different games.
Very different
really
games.
Different.
At the very least, it could use the parts of the engine to remake the game, like they used parts of the engine for the Wind Waker HD.
Sure, but obviously, yeah, like I still have and play on my N64 card, and like as recently as the last couple of months for Ocarina of Time, and so obviously I would, if they were to put it on Switch, yeah, I would definitely prefer like a more visually updated treatment. But
yeah,
that's me.
I don't think the payoff is there. Like, I would definitely give up more free space on memory for a game that's
it's
going
so
to be
easy
10
to
times
quick
better.
Archive.
Yeah.
Like, you just quick archive a bunch of stuff, and you're like, I haven't played Pokemon Let's Go with Pikachu in like this many years. Just quick archive that business, and there you go.
Yeah. So what about Tubes and Andy, real quick? Which one would you guys prefer to answer his super chat?
The question is still very confusing. I'd probably, I don't know. It'd be cool to have like a new Ocarina of Time, but I still think I'd just go with like the regular. I'm
okay.
cautiously optimistic.
Andy?
Not really sure if I understand the question that well, but if there's like
maybe Daniel
anything
and I got the
involving
question
Ocarina of
completely
Time
wrong.
or expanding that particular like sort of plot line, assuming it's canon and not like Link's crossbow trading but Ocarina of Time related or something, then I'd definitely be up for that.
Interesting. So you guys said the question was kind of confusing. So did Daniel and I get the point of the question completely wrong?
I mean,
when we
I
answered?
No, you guys are right. It's just
a bit.
the idea of doing Ocarina of Time as a Breath of the Wild style game doesn't make a lot of sense because of how drastically different the games are.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But like even if we're just talking aesthetics, I wouldn't, because these, like, the kind of the charm of all these Zelda games, they all have like their own visual style, right?
Yeah.
Their own art styles, and
I wonder if he
want
meant
to
like
lose that
picking
for
up
Ocarina
enemy
of Time.
weapons and exploring trees and stuff.
I don't know. Just like Ocarina of Time's a really tightly knit experience in my eyes, right? I don't want to like tamper with that too much, you know, because it's very special. to me. Maybe I'm gatekeeping now, but it's very special to me. I think it's very nice how it is, and just like throwing new gameplay elements in it could kind of break the experience a bit.
Right.
But yeah, also as far as like the quick download argument goes, like I like to buy physical anyways, so because I like to have a box that I can take a photo of and put on Instagram and cuddle with at night and alphabetize in a drawer, and so the ease of downloading isn't too much of an issue anyways.
Classic.
So earlier I lost the Daruk amiibos, but I found them.
You just had them. Okay, they're here.
Yeah.
You just had them.
See, I want to send Andy one now, if I have an extra. Could I send you one, Andy? For being so
sure.
for being so
I'd
nice
be
to
honored,
us.
honestly.
So yeah, Daniel. Before we got the super chat, you were talking about your thoughts on the whole rumors of Ocarina of Time HD and the release and stuff.
Was I?
So finish up what you were saying.
Oh, I was probably done. I talked too much anyways.
Someone
I
in
know
the
this is a
chat
podcast and
says,
that's what we do, but
"Is that McIntyre speaking?" Yes, this is the voice you heard for like 90% of McIntyre.
Oh, hi. Not sure if anyone watching here is familiar with an older channel called McIntyre. I have his new channel called Night Owl, and that's what I'm doing or getting across right now. Sorry if my speech is kind of slurry at this point.
Oh, Andy, this reminds me, because he mentioned is that McIntyre speaking. So the whole your voice being like really smooth and sexy thing. There's a guy, Daniel and I had a competition a long time ago for people to submit voiceover recordings or examples, and they could, whoever the winner was, we picked one boy and one girl, would be able to be in a video. But they were so good that the girl ended up joining the podcast because she was recording audio for so many videos. And the guy ended up recording a bunch of other videos for us too because they were just so good that I kept on asking him like, hey, your voice sounds 10 times better than mine. Will you do this? But the guy who won had a really smooth voice that was somewhat similar to you. So in Discord, we renamed him Sexy Mac based off of your name. So for the longest time, his name was Sexy Mac. Because we thought
Sexy
Mac 2,
Mac, huh?
Yeah, because we thought Mac 2 was
not to say that you're
unoriginal.
an unsexy Mac. don't get us wrong.
Yeah. So I guess that's all the Ocarina of Time HD stuff, right?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Everyone, welcome to the very end of the Hylian Gamescast. All you people asking questions. I've seen a couple of interesting ones earlier, but this is the time you get your questions answered. If you are a Patreon supporter, you have your question guaranteed to be answered, along with some other cool stuff. If you're in the Discord, you have a better chance of your question being on the podcast because we have a chat specifically for the Zelda mailbag for people to put their questions that I go to, and I'll put the good ones up in our actual Zelda mailbag to read off with the Patreon questions. And if you're in the live chat and you ask a really good question that we want to answer that's better than some of the other questions that we already have, then we will go with your question. So if you have any great questions, please put it here. Nintendo Prime raid? Oh, thank you so much, Nintendo Prime. That's Nate, another person that we're really good friends with and met up at E3. Used to run Zelda Informer, now he runs Nintendo Prime. So thank you for the raid. I'm not used to YouTube raids either. So
Right? I didn't
really cool.
Your Twitch gives you like this whole big thing and no love on YouTube.
Yeah.
Burrito.
So Daniel, do you want to start us off with the first question? Since the podcast's gone on so long, we're each just going to answer one question. So apologies for that, but next time if the podcast goes shorter, then we'll have more time to do questions Jubes, what's up?
Okay.
You in trouble?
That he picks the question that I want him to pick.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking at the list of questions we have in the Google Doc here.
Yeah, some of the new ones are at
Some
the
that
top.
we kind of answered already, kind of through our conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But the new ones are at the top, and the bottom ones are sort of older ones that we answered last time that I forgot and didn't take off. But the first few at the top are new from Discord.
Okay. Well, I'll just grab this one from the top here.
All right.
From
Natsu
Natsu asked.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Never
What?
mind.
What?
You got it. In the
What?
live chat, Natsu said that he already asked a question on Patreon that should have been answered. So I was going to go to Patreon to look for it, but apparently it's already in there. So
Yeah, we have a
It's
couple
here.
from Natsu.
you can go ahead and answer it. That's
Right.
crazy. You picked him as the
But yeah.
first one.
What do you know? That worked out. Do you think Nintendo might release a third DLC for Breath of the Wild to tie in the story of Breath of the Wild 2, sort of like what they did for Borderlands 2 and 3? So for those who don't know, there's before Borderlands 3 came out, they released a DLC pack for Borderlands 2, even though that was like an old game by that
Very
point.
old game by that point.
Game by that point. And so, but that DLC was basically to like tie those stories together. And I honestly, I don't think they will do that, but that would be really cool because it if they did, I don't think they will, but if they did, it would be something to sort of, I don't know, bring people back into Breath of the Wild for at least a little bit, even if it's a paid DLC, just to bring them back in that world, get them reinvested in the story, maybe pick up on things they missed. But part of me wonders if they don't want to do that because if Breath of the Wild 2 is reusing the same map, like they want to kind of keep that fresh experience there for people. But I don't know, at the same time, maybe they want to show off like what's different. So they put you back in the first game and then they bring you into the second. So I don't know. I could see it going either. But knowing Nintendo though, and what they usually do with DLC, I don't think it'll happen, but that's just me. What are you guys' words?
Nintendo did have that announcement a long time ago where they oddly said like the future of Nintendo, they were going to put a big focus on their online service and DLC for new games and older big games. And they did give a free update to download for like a 2-year-old game just a few days ago. Mario Party. Which Daniel and I, for a while, have been discussing the different possible things they could do after they fix their online service, which is mostly about the Age of Calamity getting online DLC, or like Pokemon Sword and Shield having its lag taken away and being instant. I don't think we mentioned Mario Party, but it's cool that so soon after it happened, Nintendo's already going back to update these older games. So I could 100% see Breath of the Wild getting something, but I think what they would probably do instead is have something in Age of Calamity, even though it kind of changes it spins off the timeline or whatever, but it still has a lot of connections to Breath of the Wild. So I think maybe you could see something in one of the story DLCs that vaguely goes into Breath of the Wild 2. But again, Breath of the Wild doesn't need anything to tie into Breath of the Wild 2 if it just starts like a few days or like a few weeks later. So
fair. Also, we got a super chat.
yes,
Sorry to
I've
cut
been
you off
seeing.
there.
No. I was stopping to get to that because it happened
Go
earlier.
ahead.
Do you want to do it?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go.
okay. I haven't done one today. Am I ready?
Are you?
Do you think I can hold the responsibility of doing a
I
super
believe
chat?
Do it. I believe in you.
Nintendo Prime, $2. Did you talk about any new rumors today? Raid. Yes, we did. This whole podcast was about rumors and old rumors and new rumors, and the old rumor or the new rumors that I conveniently talked about months ago.
I think as the newest rumors we've talked about today, that Nate already also made a video on his channel, on the Nintendo Prime channel. So, because I do keep up with those.
Did he do the
Nothing that you're
Metroid
not
thing?
aware of, then, Nate.
Yeah.
Did Nate do the Metroid thing?
No, okay, never mind. The newest Zelda
Okay.
rumors.
Because if he did,
Not
that
the
would be
Metroid thing.
more. Well, it would be a little bit more confirmation that the person that told me stuff was also telling other people stuff.
Okay, except for that one.
So yeah, I'll just go through the list really quick since to answer your super chat. So the way I have it wrote here, and it's a bit vague, but just to keep it simple for the list, it's there's 4 different things. Possible Zelda, Skyward Sword HD, and Age of Clams DLC reveal trailers this month before E3. Breath of the Wild 2 dev rumor. Not really development, but not from a... Is that developer? There was a big thing the other day is are testers developers, and everyone was arguing about it. I think localization, I think, counts as development. Metroid Prime 4 in localization, we talked about if the rumor was true, and if it was true, is it the full game actually entering localization, or is it just a demo segment being localized for E3? Just like a small sample, and then the rest of the game's still going to be worked on for like a year or two, which we also seen for Breath of the Wild. And then more Ocarina of Time HD and Majora's Mask HD rumors. We talked about that as well, and then we answered some questions of, I'm sure some of the questions we answered from Super Chats were from people that had questions on rumors too. And we have another Super Chat, and Tubes, you take this one because I cannot handle the pressure.
Midnight Naomi super chats $15 and tells Nate to take a shot.
That is
Nate,
something Nate does
you're
on
part
his
of our
channel.
podcast now. You gotta take a shot.
Yes, too.
He could have also
I have
told,
a shot glass, but no.
based on you
I got water.
guys.
I can-
I
could've
am
got a
not
super
taking
chat
a
like
shot,
that
that's
as well.
for sure.
So do
Not
I have to
tonight.
send this $15 to Nate now?
That's a good point.
Yeah. All right.
What was the question that we were answering? It was about
Natsu's question.
Natsu and do we think that they would do something?
Yeah, to tie in
between
the
like
games.
they did for Borderlands 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I don't think
your
they
turn,
would.
Tubes.
What?
I said it's your turn.
Yeah.
But you started answering when I said it's your turn.
Oh,
so
we were
we're
talking
both
over each other.
we're connecting.
Yeah. I really don't see Nintendo doing anything like that. I feel like they're putting a lot of work into getting us a second Breath of the Wild. I think it would be really cool if they did, to Daniel's point, absolutely looping people back into, the world that is Breath of the Wild, but at the same time, like, Age of Calamity kind of did that for a lot of people already. Like, going through and playing, like, Age of Calamity and having that, I have to go back and play Breath of the Wild. So I feel like they already did a pretty good job of that, so it's all really in the timing of when they release the next Breath of the Wild game. I don't think that they do it. It'd be cool. I don't know what they would do, but it'd be cool.
Yeah, Age of Calamity did have a lot of, even though it spins off on the story and the timeline, it does have a lot of really cool stuff in it that still connects to Breath of the Wild, that gives new context to some of the stuff going on. Like, even though it's a different timeline, that drama going on between Zelda and her father during the events of Age of Calamity would still be pretty similar to what actually happened, because we hear the different arguments and stuff and a little bit of it in Breath of the Wild. So getting more context for the relationships of everyone is really good. And I think like the way they're meeting the champions, even though it's like a branched timeline with different events, I think those meetings were still probably really similar as well. Because Baby Robot hadn't done anything to really affect any of the champions yet until the Zelda group actually goes to them. then their stories kind of split off from Breath of the Wild. But yeah, I think a bunch of Age of Calamity adds a lot of new context for people to go back and play Breath of the Wild and be like, oh, okay, this adds to this. Yeah. So what about you, Mr. Andy?
Well,
Mostly.
as it was stated, like it would be cool if there was some sort of new expansion for Breath of the Wild that leads into Breath of the Wild 2, but as is already stated here, Age of Calamity kind of filled that hole with me, especially with it being like really much tied to Breath of the Wild and the whole continuity, along with exploring new subject matter, especially with Aster and Suga. I really like Suga as a character. I think that was
Suga's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would rather just have them focus on Breath of the Wild 2 as opposed to diverting resources to Breath of the Wild 1. Not sure what the grand master plan is right now, but again, it'd be cool if they did. I just very much doubt that that's going to happen.
All right. And on that, Andy, have you found any questions that you would like to answer?
Only doing one.
Huh? Oh,
I thought we were only doing one question.
Oh,
no, we were doing
Oh,
one
are we doing
each.
one each?
But we can
Okay.
just each person answer the question instead of everyone answering. Whoever reads the question will answer it. That way it won't get into a big discussion.
Yeah,
We can
because
get
it's
through.
like 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I work in the
So
morning.
is there a question that you see in the Google Doc or in the live chat that you would like to answer?
not really sure on the spot.
All right. You can keep looking, and Daniel, you can pick one, and then we'll go back to Andy later to give him some time to find
First
one.
one.
I already picked one.
Oh,
I
Yeah,
have
'cause
one locked
Tube-
and loaded.
okay.
Let
So
me go.
yeah, Tubes
Let
had
me do
been
it.
talking, so I thought
Do
you
it.
had already got one. Tubes,
Do it.
would you like to pick a question?
Absolutely, I would be honored. So this one is from Natsu again. As a Patreon supporter, I feel like we should be answering your questions. And this one I really liked. What is your favorite fan-made title for Breath of the Wild 2 so far? So there have been some pretty bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Breath of Evil or Breath of Darkness is pretty high up there. But I think the one that got me was Bond of the Triforce. I really don't like that name. I think that's a very cheesy name.
Wait, did he ask for
But
bad
the
names?
question's favorite one. What is your
Yeah.
favorite one?
Okay.
Or is it
My
your favorite
one is
because
Breath
it's
of
so
Evil.
cheesy?
Is Breath of Evil really?
Yeah, I just think it sounds so dumb.
It does sound dumb. That's the.
It sounds so dumb. I love it.
Yeah, I think on the last podcast with RMFH, we were talking about that Hope of the Wild thing, and like we started naming off all the really cringy, edgy, almost meme lord Zelda titles that people had come up with.
The Zelda Wii U days, one of the popular titles that was running around before Breath of the Wild was like sort of revealed as a title was Shard of Nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you remember that, Jesse.
Yeah, it was one of the big rumored games. There's a fake screenshot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
I'm looking-
that just doesn't sit right. The Shard of, what is this? Shard of Nightmare?
Yeah.
That's just like, that's bad.
Like really, really edgy.
Love it.
All right, so this is a question that is in line with the podcast. It'll give Andy a little bit more time to answer. But from the live chat, I think this is the first one from the live chat. Javier Vasquez, I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. He says, do you think Nintendo will dedicate an entire Nintendo Direct to reveal more news on Breath of the Wild 2, or do you think they will just reveal more news during E3? I think we will get a trailer at E3, and then like a month before the game actually releases, maybe 2 months before, they may not have a Nintendo Direct, but they will have a series of videos, not just trailers, like, because there's always the gameplay trailer, the reveal trailer, the release date trailer, the awards or review scores trailers, the story trailers. So every big game gets 4 or 5 trailers. So it's going to get like a series of videos leading up to it. But I think in the same way, Breath of the Wild and even Twilight Princess HD ended up getting a series of like behind the scenes documentaries. Like for Breath of the Wild, there was like 4 or 5 different 30-40 minute videos of Nintendo just talking about the game and going behind the scenes and showing off gameplay. And they had a similar biography thing or documentary for Twilight Princess HD, even though it was just a remake, but they still had a series of videos talking about it. And that's where they had the thing where Aonuma said, if you play through Twilight Princess HD, then when you play Breath of the Wild, a lot, like, he said something where like there'd be connections there where like things would be familiar or something. But it wasn't just Wolf Link that he was talking about. It was like something else. But I don't know. I didn't really see too much. I didn't see anything connecting Breath of the Wild to Twilight Princess any more than I seen Breath of the Wild connecting to every other single Zelda game. So, yeah. And, Andy, have you seen a question yet?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
This one's coming from Jay Meister. I think that's how you say his name. He said, how would you react if there was a Legend of Zelda movie? And this was something that was kind of mulling over, just about like video game adaptations to film or shows and things of that sort. One sort of show that I've really got into is the Castlevania animated series on Netflix. I'm not sure if anyone here has watched it.
I've watched it.
I love the animation on that. And just the story and how it adapts Castlevania 3 and also with other games within the series. I think it's really well done. I'm really excited for the new season that's coming out pretty soon. And honestly, I think animation lends itself really well when it comes to adaptations for video games. There are other really good examples, like Dodo had a recent animated series with Netflix that's also really well done.
Have you heard of this small anime based off of this video game, Pokemon?
Oh yeah.
Is that new?
Like,
apparently it's really successful.
Oh.
But yeah, sorry, you can finish, Andy. I didn't mean to interrupt.
But yeah, if there was any sort of Nintendo like content that they wish to adapt into whatever, I would definitely would like to see that in animation, not necessarily live action. I'm not sure if anyone here has heard, there's this one dude who animates Star Fox animations. I think it's called Fox in Space.
I've seen that, actually. It's really funny.
Yeah, like just the general aesthetic of the show and how the atmosphere kind of lends itself. I'm not sure if I want to see a live action version of that. I think 2D is perfect for those type of stories. And I'm not sure if it's just mainly just the Western thing, like 2D animation doesn't really, like, there's almost like a taboo against it as opposed to towards live action. And so, yeah.
All right. And with that, this is the end of the podcast. Thank you to the 157 people still watching after however many 2 or 3 hours we've been going on. Our special guest, of course, Andy, thank you for coming on. It was kind of a last-minute request, so thank you for being able to join.
Glad to be on here.
And Chubes, as always, it's awesome having you return for the podcast. And Daniel, thank you so much. I've been wanting to have you on for so long, and to finally have the opportunity.
You can just say you're sick of me. It's okay.
Okay, so so thank you all for watching. Check out everyone. Andy, our special guest of the night. Where can everyone find you?
They could find me on the Night Owl channel. I assume. Well, I could also post a link on here too. It's also
yeah,
linked.
I've been posting
I'll
links.
put links and everything in the
Thanks.
description after we're done. So that'll be
I
there as
very
well.
much appreciate that. And from there, there's pretty much all my social media sites. You could also look up McIntyre and just watch older videos, even though most of them are probably out of date at this point.
All right, and do you have a Patreon where people could support you if they're a fan of you?
Oh yeah, I have Night Owl Patreon. I actually just finished recording the vocals for the latest video, and I'm trying to get that out as soon as I can, since I haven't been as consistent as I should have been with uploads recently for Night Owl.
Yeah, it's been a bit hard for me to be fully motivated lately as well.
All
Something in the, I don't know, I was going to blame it on aliens, but that's stupid. Daniel, hi. Since, as we just finished saying, your first time being on, so I can barely speak. I'm so nervous. Jeez. I mean, we've had on composers for Banjo and Kazooie. We've had developers and writers and voice actors and musicians and all these famous or well-known people, but I just get starstruck every time I look at you. So let us know, please. Where can we come and follow the one and only Capt Burger?
Right. All of my social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, Patreon, etc. Everything is Capt Person. Like, there's a burger, and he was a captain, and that was actually my dad. So that's who I am. I do stream weekly on Twitch, and actually I usually dual stream. Not supposed to, but I dual stream on my Twitch and YouTube, and I've been really churning out videos since the start of the year, pretty consistently, thankfully, for like the first time ever, which is why people are actually starting to follow my channel. So so please check that out if you like Zelda videos. Lately, just been going through and doing what I've called a dungeon design series, looking at every Zelda dungeon. Started with Ocarina of Time, actually. Just finished Majora's Mask, and I'm just working on Wind Waker now. And it's sort of like a retrospective review, walkthrough, theory, all of these things sort of bundled into one video for each dungeon. And it's so some of my better stuff. So yeah, go check that out. And then if you like it, awesome. Please, thank you.
You have
That's all I've got to say.
Patreon as well that people can support you?
I do, yes.
Get early access
And
to
I always
videos?
feel like I don't do enough for but you do get early access to everything on Patreon as well. So but I never like plugging it, because I always feel like I'm begging for cash, and it just feels it goes against my nature, I guess. So
And you're about to hit your big milestone on YouTube as well.
that's true. Yeah. So I mean, like I said, just at the start of the year, I really just actually started posting videos consistently. And so basically it's almost as if I just started the channel because of that. And now we're just about to hit our first 1,000 on that channel. So it's a big step. We just surpassed like 900 the other day. And it was only like a week before that we had just passed 800. So it seems to be like
I feel like
climbing
you
faster.
just hit the goal for 500.
I did. It was like not that long ago. So it's really cool. It's almost like once I started making videos, people actually.
And for those who may not know, Daniel isn't just a co-host of the podcast. He's also made a bunch of the videos on the Game Over Jesse channel, top 10s, theories, news videos. He's done a bunch of them, editing and voiceover. And I think he's even edited videos on the channel that have passed 1 million views. So a couple of our most popular videos was actually done by Daniel. So if you like the videos on this channel, then you're automatically going to like the videos on his own channel. But not only does he post his own theories or other lore retrospective videos, but he also has the Hylian tours where you explore and basically document the different areas in Breath of the Wild.
Hyrule Tours is a fun little series. It's far less consistent. I've done like only a handful of those. But I mean, really, actually, if we're plugging that video, then I have to shout out to RMFH because he helps me a lot with those videos. He might as well co-run that series with me because he's left. He's basically provided me about half the footage for those videos that I use.
He's really good at getting gameplay and scenery shots.
Just really, really beautiful shots that I'm just like, oh, that's better than what I did. That's so, yeah, definitely. If you like those ones, then go to his channel and his second channel. He's a good dude too. So,
and
shout out within a shout out.
Yeah, which there was a 10% chance he was going to join the podcast today, but he had other duties. And then finally, you have your longer running series, which is Daniel's literally going through doing a walkthrough of every single Zelda dungeon. And it's not just a walkthrough or strategy guide or whatever, let's play. While he's going through it and showing you how to do it, he's also taking time to talk about lore or connections to other games or changes made from like the N64 game dungeon or bosses to the 3DS dungeons and bosses or gameplay mechanics and other changes and stuff. So it's not just a walkthrough, it's like a history lesson full of lore and basically everything else. And when he makes the comparisons, I think Rick even captured the 3DS footage that you use.
Actually, yes, he did, because I worry that my computer will catch on fire if I try, and I don't have a 3DS capture card, so he did provide that footage too. So RMFH is a real good dude.
So everyone here, there's 122 people here. If like 80% of you, 85% of you went to youtube.com/CaptBurgerson or searched Capt Burgerson on YouTube and subscribed to him, we would be able to just jump past that first 1,000 subscribers on his channel. So everyone, if you can help out, please go subscribe to Capt Burgerson, because if you're watching this channel, like literally if you're watching this channel, you already enjoy the videos that's going to be on his channel because he does a lot of the videos on this channel as well. But finally, 𝐓𝐿𝐼ma.
Yes.
Everyone's been waiting. Like, just a couple of weeks ago, everyone expected you to just win every single Oscar award at the Oscars. It didn't happen.
Yeah. That was
So
pretty.
we're all kind of bummed out. So tell us something to get us excited again. Where can we go to follow you?
Heck yeah. You can come hang out with me on Twitter at 𝐓𝐿𝐼ma. You can also come hang out with me on Twitch whenever I'm streaming, which I'm trying to get back into the groove of, so twitch.tv/𝐓𝐿𝐼ma with an extra A. Also, kinda secret, but I'm currently working on hopefully launching a YouTube channel that has nothing to do with any of this. So, stay tuned!
It's going to be the adventures of her and her best friend, which is a boiled egg. Spoilers.
Actually, I would watch that. It's just boiled egg and yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff can people find on your Twitch when you live stream?
Video games. I normally try to stream whatever is current, depending on how I'm feeling. Right now we're doing Pokemon Snap, and I was doing Monster Hunter last time. We'll see how it goes. But so far, Pokemon Snap right now.
I really enjoyed your not Luigi's Mansion. You did that too, but your Paper Mario.
Oh, Mario.
I really liked those streams, but that could be because I was watching them with Layla. So maybe I'm biased.
What about Sexy Man?
Oh, Sexy Man. You know what? I found out that the second No, the time that I got Sexy Man to roll over for me, it wasn't actually Sexy Man, it was Sexy Woman, so...
Oh no.
Wait,
Yeah,
now I'm
this is awkward.
confused.
I'll
Is
send
this
you the clips later.
Snorlax?
Was it slacking?
Oh,
Slacking, yeah.
He was like in
Pokemon
this
Snap.
like very like this pose like.
yeah. For those who don't know, I am a Snorlax, so
Yeah.
take pride in that. But yeah, I guess that's everyone. Again, special thank you to Andy. I think this like you disappeared from the internet for like a couple of years, and then you randomly liked or retweeted one of my tweets, and I was like, oh my god, he's alive. So I messaged you, and I'm glad that we got to do this because it was nice getting to catch up and everything, and not just hearing about your YouTube channel and stuff, but also having you as just a part of the conversation about everything. I apologize to everyone who sat through the entire 3 hours probably of this. I don't know how long it's been. We started officially at 10. It's 1:14 now. 3 hours ahead of 𝐓𝐿𝐷𝐬𝐿 and Daniel. So it's crazy that we got up past 200 people at one point, and now there's still 118 people watching us, even though it's been so many hours, and we're literally just promoting ourselves and not talking about anything important. So thank you all. I will probably take a couple of these and upload them as their own segments, and I'll try to have the audio version of the podcast on iTunes, and I think it's on Spotify and some other places as well. I have to check that, but the audio version will be on there if you prefer to listen to the audio instead of looking at our beautiful faces. And Andy couldn't even get on his camera because he was just so gorgeous his camera couldn't handle it. So yeah,
Burst into flames.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, thank you all. If you want to follow me, everything's at Game Over Jesse, but I encourage you to go subscribe to our guest Andy or Night Owl, and go subscribe and help Daniel pass his 1,000 subscriber goal. There's a few of you in the chat that said that you just now subscribed, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
𝐓𝐿𝐷𝐬𝐿, you don't have a YouTube for people to go sub to, but people can go follow you on Twitter, so everyone should go do that. 𝐓𝐿𝐷𝐬𝐿 with 2 A's, right? Or is that Twitch?
Just on Twitch.
Okay, so it's just 𝐓𝐿𝐷𝐬𝐿. And again, thank you all. I'm really bad at outros and stuff and just talking or interacting with other humans in general, but I think this was a pretty good stream. Up to 200, and there was altogether over 6,100, so I think that's good for one stream, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Good night,
Yeah, I
everyone.
think so.
All right. Time
Sorry
for
if we
bed.
kept you all past your bedtimes, but go eat, use the bathroom, brush your teeth, take a shower if you have to, and good night.